Chapter 12:34. The world of the 9 prefectures. The undulating sand dunes were dyed bright red by the setting sun, extending to the end of the world. It made people understand why this place was called Red Prefecture. Suddenly, a mirage appeared in the sky above the desert. There were only 2 colors, black and white, but it changed into a magnificent scene. It gave people the feeling that the boundless world was within it. Nearly 1,000 cultivators had gathered in this desolate and silent land, ranging from weak chi practitioners to powerful golden core cultivators. They were all looking up at the mirage in the sky, carefully guarding against each other. Not long ago, the news that the painting tomb was about to open spread. It even included the exact time and location. It caused a storm among the disciples of the painters of the world, and they all rushed to this desolate desert. There were also some cultivators who were not painters who wanted to try their luck. The 5 ultimate graves valued luck more than anything else. They might be able to sneak into the painting tomb, and it would be worth it even if they took 1 or 2 artifacts. However, it was also because of the widespread news that no one dared to act rashly. It was generally peaceful. As for whether there would be a bloody battle when the painting tomb truly opened, no one knew. Suddenly, a sandstorm rose in the desert. The fine sand was like a fiery red fog, blurring the mirage in the sky. A terrifying demonic aura instantly enveloped the desert. The cultivators looked back in fear. A hunchback elder suddenly appeared on the sand dunes in the east, staring at them indifferently. White Camel Sand King. Someone immediately called out the elder's identity, causing even more panic. Leave the desert. White Camel Sand King's voice was low and hoarse. It was as merciless as the desert. Someone tried to plead, "Senior, this concerns the heritage of the painters. Please give us some time. We will leave after the painting tomb opens." Leave the desert. The sandstorm became more violent, covering the sky. The sand dunes wriggled as if they had turned into giants. They were about to stand up and crush the fool who dared to wake them from their sweet dreams. The cultivators were shocked. A demon king was not someone they could fight. However, the mirage in the sky. Even though it was obscured by the sandstorm, it was getting clearer. It was as if it was close at hand. The painting tomb was about to open. Just when they did not know if they should retreat, a clear dragon roar resounded through the sky. Another demon monarch? The cultivators fell into despair. The White Camel Sand King slowly raised his head, and a black dragon descended from the sky, landing below the mirage. Fellow Taoist White Camel. They didn't mean to offend you, so why are you bullying them? A slightly plump old man with a ruddy complexion shook his hand and unfurled a scroll painting. The dragon returned to the painting and continued to swim. It turned out that this dragon with the strength of a demon king was actually just a painting. It reminded people of the Dragon King of the Sea of the past. In that case, what kind of existence would be able to wield such a painting? Grand Preceptor Dong. The cultivators were pleasantly surprised. They hadn't expected that the opening of the painting tomb would actually attract this person. That was right. How could he not know such an important matter? The Grand Preceptor was one of the 3 dukes, possessing an extremely great status in the imperial court of Great Xia. Even regular great cultivators had no right to hold the position. It had to be an existence that stood at the apex of this world. The current Grand Preceptor was this old man with the surname Dong. He was also a painter, and it was said that he had collected 100 wondrous paintings. Every single one of them possessed startling power. Just now, the roving dragon painting was only one of them. Just like how the schools of Buddhism and Taoism revered the left and right imperial advisors, the disciples of the school of painting all revered the Grand Preceptor Dong. The White Camel Sand King said nothing. There was only the howling of the sandstorm, and the sand dunes moved like waves. They surged towards the cultivators. The Grand Preceptor Dong smiled and extended his hand to unfurl another painting. The painting was dripping with ink, and the bamboo forest was rustling, but they all bent over deeply. A gentle breeze blew through the painting, stopping the sandstorm and blowing away the sand dunes. The painting was called the Bamboo Wind Painting. It was not a painting of bamboo, but wind. The White Camel Sand King suddenly turned around and gazed into the distance. He frowned deeply, and as a result, He withdrew the sandstorm and descended the sand dunes. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. They admired the Grand Preceptor Dong's methods even more. He could even force the White Camel Sand King into retreat. A few young men and women followed behind the Grand Preceptor Dong. They all gave off a noble aura, and they all praised him. Master Sure is impressive, using the light breeze to suppress the sandstorm. Even the White Camel Sand King was helpless against him. All he could do was retreat. Master is a mighty Grand Preceptor. Becoming enemies with Master is becoming enemies with Great Xia. He only retreated when Master took action. The White Camel Sand King Sure is stubborn, just like the rumors. As for the others, they did not even have the right to praise him. They went up and clasped their hands in thanks. The Grand Preceptor Dong stroked his beard gently and said modestly, "We've all been conferred by Great Xia, so we can be regarded as subjects of the same court. Our statuses are about the same. He's just doing me a favor." Master resides in the center of the Dragon Province. The White Camel Sand King is just a demon king. I heard he's even colluding with the rebel Banyan Tree King. How can they be mentioned in the same breath? Said an arrogant young man. He had already undergone the second heavenly tribulation, so he had the right to be arrogant. Don't speak nonsense. This is his territory after all. If you piss him off, it'll be no good for anyone. The Grand Preceptor Dong reprimanded him, but he did not stop smiling. At this moment, the mirage in the sky became clearer and clearer. It conjured mountains, rivers, people, flowers, birds, fish, and insects. It was the wondrous art of the school of painting. Even the Grand Preceptor Dong sighed in amazement when he saw it. The Five Absolutes Immortal truly was an astonishing figure. He could actually use the path of painting to such a degree. If he could enter and see what it was like, it would definitely benefit his cultivation greatly. Master, the painting tomb is about to open. What do we do with these people? The arrogant young man pointed casually. His face was filled with disdain, as if he was looking at a group of ignorant dogs. Grand Preceptor, we'll leave right now, someone said in a hurry, being sensible. The opening of the painting tomb is a grand occasion for us painters. Everyone has come from far away, so how can I just chase everyone away like this? Whether or not you can enter the painting tomb will completely depend on your luck. It doesn't depend on your status, so there's no harm in waiting a little longer. However, those who are not of the school of painting should leave. The Grand Preceptor Dong waved his hand, and nearly 100 cultivators hurriedly dispersed. The ones left behind were the disciples of the school of painting. They all praised the Grand Preceptor Dong's magnanimity, and only hoped that they could be the lucky ones to enter the painting tomb. The Grand Preceptor Dong smiled faintly. Not many people knew that this news had been spread by him in the first place. His goal was to gather the disciples of the school of painting and prepare to establish a large sect similar to the Spirit Kingdom Temple. They could be the patriarch of a family and also the sect master of a sect. With the world in such turmoil and the Great Xia dynasty on the verge of collapse, just the position of the Grand Preceptor was no longer secure enough. And when the painting tomb opened, who would be able to compete with him? In order to obtain this news from Prince Si Qing, he had sacrificed a wondrous painting. He would definitely not allow others to encroach upon it. However, that Chu Danqing who possessed the jade blood of vermilion painting had not come. Presumably, without the support of that freak, Li Qingshan, he did not dare to come. As he pondered, his gaze focused. A white figure was standing on the sand dune where the White Camel Sand King had left. She wore a moon-white monk's robe that fluttered in the night wind, yet she had long hair that reached the ground. Even though her face was expressionless, she still caused others to sigh in admiration. Yet, there was a pair of terrifying eyes embedded within. If one were to say that the White Camel Sand King was like this desert, there was still vitality and hope beneath his indifferent appearance. Countless beings lived in the desert, and underground rivers surged beneath the sand dune, ready to transform into an oasis at any time. He had also acted as a guide countless times, giving people hope amidst the storm. Yet her eyes were empty. Not to mention this desert, even the hungry ghost realm, where only the dead existed, appeared excessively noisy in her eyes. There was too much pointless greed, resentment, and hope, and she would use great mercy to bestow great destruction. The Grand Preceptor Dong actually did not know when she had arrived. Even though he had seen her with his own eyes, he could not sense any aura. Yet he suddenly thought of a term, foe of Buddha. His expression changed greatly, and he immediately understood why the White Camel Sand King had retreated. However, he was absolutely unwilling to retreat just like that. He opened his mouth and said, "Fellow Taoist, are you?" Before he had finished speaking, her figure had vanished, and a voice that was devoid of sorrow and joy rang out beside his ear, "Yes." The Grand Preceptor Dong immediately felt that he could not move, and it was difficult for him to circulate his magic power. Yet that beautiful face was already within reach, and the white bone sword pierced straight for his chest. Chapter 12:35. What a formidable foe! The Grand Tutor was both surprised and furious. He sensed death that he had not felt for many years. His blue robes suddenly swelled up, turning ice as he forcefully blocked the Buddha-slaying sword. As it turned out, the robes were a painting, depicting 1,000 years of ice and 10,000 years of frozen earth. Little and twisted her sword, shattering the ice and ripping the robes. The Grand Tutor retreated in a sorry state, greatly shocked. His frigid cloak was a defensive treasure, yet it could not even block a single strike from her. However, it managed to buy him some time. Suddenly, he unfurled his arms and bellowed, "Myriad paintings!" Swish! 100 paintings unfurled together. There were mountains, rivers, people, flowers, birds, fish, and insects, as well as demons and wondrous realms. Every single painting had their own uses. It could depict powerful existences of the third heavenly tribulation, or it could conjure powerful techniques of ice, fire, and lightning. It could change and interweave into a myriad of colors. However, when 100 paintings fused together, it could form a domain of its own, encompassing everything. Just his strength alone was enough to rival several dozen great cultivators working together. The Grand Tutor definitely lived up to his reputation as the leader of the three dukes. As soon as the paintings were unfurled, there was a flash of blood-red light, and they all vanished, landing in a long, blood-red banner. A spatial treasure! The Grand Tutor's face changed. Little and wielded the sword in her right hand and the banner in her left. She remained expressionless as if she had already expected this. A string of skull prayer beads flew out from her wrist, turning into skulls that bit at the Grand Tutor's entire body. Their sharp teeth quickly tore through his protective true chi before tearing at his flesh. However, strangely enough, no matter how the skull demon bit, the wounds on the Grand Tutor's body would always heal quickly. Not a single drop of blood flowed out, and the samadhi flames of white bone were unable to set him alight. It was as if there was only a portrait of a fleshless puppet there. The Grand Tutor allowed the skull demon to bite him as he stared at Little and coldly. At this moment, in the distant Dragon Province, a self-portrait of the Grand Tutor hung in the very depths of the Grand Tutor's estate. It was exactly the same figure and expression. Wherever the skull demon bit, the portrait would be damaged. This was the supreme technique of the school of painting, soul substitution. As long as the soul was not destroyed, the substitution would not die. At the same time, he was immune to many special attacks. Both the Vinaya Sect's decree and the samadhi flame of white bone were restrained. A painter's weakest link was his own body. Even if he could control many powerful scrolls, if his body was destroyed, everything would be for naught. That was why he created such a miraculous spell. When the enemy wanted to win by assassination, he was about to crash into an iron plate and fall into a tight encirclement. You want to trap my 100 wondrous paintings with a mere magic treasure? Enemy of the Buddha, I will make you fall here today. Grand Preceptor Dong activated the 100 scrolls of wondrous paintings, the blood sea banner surging with brilliant colors as he was about to break out. Little and abandoned the blood sea banner and gripped the hilt of his sword with both hands, his bare feet so white that they were almost transparent. He stepped lightly on the yellow sand, but did not leave any marks. He swung his sword again. This sword was like the horns of an antelope. It was untraceable, as if it existed with the heavens and earth, without a trace of sharpness. Grand Preceptor Dong's brows furrowed tightly. This Buddha enemy's sword Dao was unimaginably strong, and he had all sorts of methods that were powerful and bizarre. It was no wonder that he could create such monstrous evil in Pearl City. If he did not have the painted soul substitute, he would probably fail miserably in such an easy task today. But when he met those empty eyes, he suddenly felt an indescribable terror. There was definitely something wrong. If he wanted to retreat, he would be devoured by the skeleton demon. It was already too late. The edge of the sword slashed across his neck. A spray of blood flew, igniting into the samadhi flames of white bone in midair. A crack suddenly appeared on the self-portrait in the Grand Preceptor's residence. Originally, no matter how the skeleton demon bit, it would only damage the portrait, but this crack actually tore through the paper and landed on his neck. How is this possible? Grand Preceptor Dong's eyes were wide open, filled with disbelief. A deathly stillness consumed his entire body, and he could not help but cover his neck with his hands, kneeling on the ground like a mortal. He desperately wanted to escape his nascent soul, but there was a similar wound on the neck of the nascent soul in his body. Blood seeped out from between his fingers and landed on the yellow sand, creating a white flame. He raised his head with great effort. That beautiful face was still expressionless. The night wind lifted his white clothes and black hair, as if he was death itself. With a boom, pale white flames spread out, enveloping the entire self-portrait and instantly burning it to ashes. Everything happened in an instant. Before the others could understand what had happened, they saw Grand Preceptor Dong burn up, pale white flames gushing out from his 7 orifices. They were both shocked and terrified. "Master! Grand Preceptor!" Panting, Chu Danqing flew over the sand dune and cried out in alarm, "Don't!" Half a month ago, in order to enter the painting tomb, he had come to find Li Qingshan to escort him. Only then did he learn that Li Qingshan was no longer in this world. He was greatly disappointed and had originally planned to come to the Crimson Province on his own. However, Little and had taken the initiative to accept this matter, because this was a promise he had made. On the way, they had not exchanged a single word. She was more unfamiliar than he had ever remembered. What her exquisite appearance brought him was not attraction, but fear. He was even unable to form a portrait of her in his mind. His mind was completely blank, seemingly able to swallow up all color. A moment ago, she had suddenly sped up and he had a bad premonition. He had finally caught up with great difficulty, only to see this scene. Grand Preceptor Dong had an extremely high status in the hearts of the disciples of the school of painting. Chu Danqing had once copied many of his paintings. Unless absolutely necessary, he would not be willing to make an enemy of him. He had not expected that she had already killed him. Little and grabbed back the Blood Sea banner and spat out 100 masterless paintings. The ownerless objects fell to the ground. With a casual wave of his hand, he swept all the cultivators present into the sea of blood. At the same time, he raised his white wrist, the skull prayer beads rising into the sky and scattering in every direction. The surging sea of blood swallowed up all the cultivators, only spitting out the talismans and artifacts on their bodies. The cultivators that Grand Preceptor Dong had scattered were all pierced through and killed by the skull prayer beads, burning into balls of samadhi flames of white bone. They were extremely dazzling on the approaching night of the desert. Thus, no one survived. The desert recovered its silence, only the sighing of the wind. At some unknown time, a waning moon had risen into the sky, silently facing the setting sun. Chu Danqing stared dumbfounded at this scene and asked furiously, "What did you do? Why did you kill them? They were not a match for you at all." Little and suddenly turned her head, her empty eyes stopping all words. Chu Danqing's mind trembled as he suddenly understood. She really would kill him, just like how she had killed these people. The only thing that had connected them was a promise from Li Qingshan. Just at this time, as the light of the setting sun and the splendor of the moon intersected, the mirage in the air suddenly burst forth with magnificent colors, ever-changing and beautiful. The sun and moon shone together, the painting tomb opened. But this magnificent transformation was not reflected in her eyes in the slightest. Gazing into the depths of the endless night sky, she finally said, "You should go in." Chapter 12:36. The moonlight was silvery, the vegetation was verdant, the lake was quiet, and vines grew. This might have been nothing special in the Mist Province or the Green Province, but it was an extremely rare sight in the Scarlet Province. Oases in deserts were often referred to as pearls, and this oasis was the largest pearl of the Scarlet Province, Pearl City. The domed palace with the distinctive characteristics of the Scarlet Province stood silently in the darkness. The lights of the past had been completely extinguished long ago, and the once bustling streets were covered in a layer of moss. There were neither cries of birds nor cries of insects in the surroundings. Only when the night wind blew up the wind chimes would they ring out clearly. The White Camel Sand King stood on the moss and stared at the wind chimes for a while. He could tell that they were originally camel bells, so he made his way into the depths of the oasis without batting an eyelid. He arrived in front of a magnificent door, crossed over the tall sill, and passed by a mottled plaque. The plaque was inscribed with the words, "The King of Wei's Estate," in a flamboyant style, indicating the power this place once possessed. In the center of the estate was a great lake that radiated with dense spiritual chi. At the center of the lake was a small island with many majestic palaces built on it. This was originally the heart of the entire estate, or even the entire Scarlet Province, but now, it was enveloped by a towering tree. Aerial roots crisscrossed like dragons and snakes, and the shade of the tree was so thick that even the moonlight could not pass through. It was like a dark cloud had enveloped Pearl City. The White Camel Sand King crossed the surface of the lake and arrived under the tree. He knocked the tree with his walking stick. "Old friend, that little friend of yours is far too vicious. Have you come to complain to me?" The Banyan Tree King's simple, elegant face appeared on the tree, and his gaze became even more vast and profound. "I'm warning you. Thank you for your warning, but she's no one's friend. I originally thought you could influence her a little at the very least if she fought for you. She's not fighting for me, but for a promise. Apart from that person, no one can influence her. One of the 3 ministers has died here. The Great Xia will never let this matter go. She's already killed a provincial lord, so why would she care about killing another grand tutor? From the moment I set foot on this path, the Great Xia would never let me go. I know you love life and hate death, but no matter how crazy and unreasonable her actions seem, they are all based on rational judgment." "Is killing them all rational?" the White Camel Sand King asked. He was born in the desert. Living in the desert for a long time, they felt that life was not easy, and that was why they frequently lent a helping hand to mortals. Even the weakest of the outsiders wanted to give them a chance of survival. Just now in front of the painting tomb, he tried to give those cultivators blinded by greed a chance of survival. Tell them not to face her. However, he was disturbed by Grand Preceptor Dong's attack. Moreover, he did not want to face her, so he could only retreat. How could he be forced to retreat by a painting of Grand Preceptor Dong? However, the result was worse than expected. She did not even spare those who had left the painting tomb. "You think that Grand Preceptor Dong should retreat? Do I need to say a few words to get them to disperse? What do you mean? Now, she can solve all the problems without saying a word. Weighing the pros and cons is called being rational, as expected of someone who is about to become a god." The White Camel Sand King said indifferently. If the Banyan Tree King had not said it, he would never have imagined that someone would kill one of the 3 dukes of the Great Xia just to say a few words. "There is no need to be angry. You know that I also cherish living things. This is just imitating her thinking. There are many uncertainties in the painting tomb, and Grand Preceptor Dong is the greatest potential threat. She wants to clear the area before the painting tomb opens, and the only choice is to ensure that those who have made a promise to Li Qingshan. As for the others, although the risk is not great, it is not as good as spending a little effort to avoid hidden dangers. I believe she has considered all of this. She does not trust you. The Tao she walks has always been like this. Perhaps I would rather she be trapped in the painting tomb?" The Banyan Tree King sighed. "Are you not worried at all that the entire 9 states has become like this? She is far more terrifying than the soaring Locust King." The White Camel Sand King was furious. He raised his cane and pointed it at the entire Pearl City. A fierce gust of wind stirred up the wind chimes, causing them to ring. A year ago, the Lord of the Scarlet Province refused to hand over the Scarlet Province cauldron. The Banyan Tree King commanded the other folk of the Mist Province, while Li Fengyuan led the winged folk of the city amongst the clouds. The White Camel Sand King also lent a helping hand due to his friendship with the Banyan Tree King. The three of them formed an army and attacked the city with all their might. Only she never took action, guarding against any possible changes. Only when the city was breached did she suddenly take action, personally killing the King of Wei, his wife, and the 8 honored guests. Then she set fire to everything, sparing not even a single bird or insect. Afterwards, she moved to various parts of the Scarlet Province and destroyed all the sects that took part in the battle. Close to 20 great cultivators directly died to her hands, and the human cultivation community of the Scarlet Province had basically completely collapsed. The name of the enemy of Buddha shocked the world. Only when she emerged from the shadow of the Demon King of the North Moon did the world understand just how terrifying Great Beauty and White Bone were. The Hawk Wolf Guard declared her to be their greatest enemy, even more so than the Banyan Tree King. However, neither the Protector Hawk God nor the Skyfrost Wolf King ever appeared. Even when the White Camel Sand King ran into her in his territory, he would take a detour around her. This is my sin. If it weren't for this battle, the future expansion wouldn't have gone so smoothly. The Banyan Tree King closed his eyes. He had already taken over the Mist Province, the Green Province, the Scarlet Province, the Harmony Province, the Cloud Province, and the Thunder Province. That was equivalent to taking over most of the 9 provinces. A large part of the reason why everything had gone so smoothly was because of her deterrence. Even great cultivators felt fear. They had to weigh the pros and cons and consider the consequences. Afterwards, the various estates all accepted the Banyan Tree King's conditions and gave up the 9 cauldrons. None of the guests were willing to fight her. When he opened his eyes again, his face was already filled with worry. I've never been so worried. No one understands her terror better than me. She helped me take the 9 cauldrons for a promise, as well as to borrow my power to suppress the hungry ghost realm. I don't even dare to disappoint her, or she'll come up with something herself. The White Camel Sand King's heart shivered. He was unable to imagine what the outcome would be, but he understood one thing very well. The greatest threat to this world was neither the invasion of the demon domain, nor the devouring of the hungry ghost realm, but her. You should feel fortunate that she hasn't slaughtered just for the sake of power. I hope Qingshan can return soon. The Banyan Tree King sighed from the bottom of his heart. Before Chu Danqing could say anything else, he was sucked into the painting tomb. Little and followed closely behind, but the painting tomb closed before her. She grabbed the Forsaken Immortal sword with a flip of her hand and cut through it. She sensed something and glanced in the direction of Pearl City. Chapter 1237. Igniting 30% of the living beings in this world would basically be enough to suppress the ghost tower. This was the result of her calculations. However, once she started doing this, the remaining 70% of living beings would definitely react violently. The Banyan Tree King had already occupied 6 prefectures and was determined to become the god of the 9 prefectures. He would definitely resist with all his strength, so it would be better to burn them all. The Banyan Tree King's body was incomparably huge, and his branches and roots were intertwined. He was almost invincible in the 9 prefectures, but the Buddha-slaying sword happened to restrain him, so it should not be too difficult to deal with. With his deduction ability, he should be able to realize this. She hoped that he would use all his strength to take down the ghost tower. Otherwise, when Qingshan returned, he would definitely be furious. But even if he was angry, he had to do this. Because before he returned, she could not leave. In an ancient temple deep in the mountains, red leaves rustled and fell on the steps. This is the painting tomb. Chu Danqing stood in front of the temple, his heart filled with amazement. He suddenly turned around and was shocked to find that she was standing silently behind him. Her white monk robes matched the scenery of the ancient temple very well, but her expression would never match any scenery. The strange sword in her hand was even more inexplicably spoiling the scenery. My promise with Qingshan has been fulfilled. You have also obtained Grand Preceptor Dong's 100 strange paintings. There are many dangers in the painting tomb, so you should leave. Kiki, little brat, you talk big. What danger can there be in this broken place? When you see that fake dragon and slash it a few more times, you will know who is in danger. The Forsaken Immortal Sword let out a sharp and strange laugh, completely breaking the quiet atmosphere. Chu Danqing's expression changed greatly. Little and lightly flicked the blade with her finger. The Forsaken Immortal Sword immediately stopped talking. When you safely leave the painting tomb, my promise will be fulfilled. Then, all right. Chu Danqing stepped on the red leaves and walked up the steps. Little and followed closely behind. When she stepped on the first step, the steps suddenly dispersed like smoke. The red maple trees on both sides suddenly burst into flames, and the raging flames swept toward her. Just now, Chu Danqing realized that everything around him was actually a painting. The flames were also very close to him, but he did not feel any heat. Instead, his blood was faintly boiling. It was very comfortable. A single step separated them into two different worlds. He couldn't help but stop and look back worriedly. Little and stood firmly in the void, expressionless, as if he didn't hear anything. The light from the Forsaken Immortal Sword twisted and turned. The surrounding scenery immediately shattered. He couldn't touch her at all. The Forsaken Immortal Sword was the ruler of the Sword Catacomb. The Sword Tao was a Tao of slaughter. Regardless of whether it was destructive power or lethality, it was far from what the painting tomb could compare to. I don't need your protection. I beg you, little, and get out. Chu Danqing's face was full of bitterness as he cupped his hands and bowed. It was to protect the painting tomb. Every flower and tree here was a famous painting, yet they were mercilessly torn to shreds. It really made his heart bleed. Little and said nothing and had no intention of withdrawing. The painting tomb shook, and more sceneries joined the attack, but they were all shattered by the abandoned immortal sword. Sigh, I'm afraid of you. Chu Danqing didn't dare to linger and ran forward with all his might. Little and followed behind him at a steady pace. The abandoned immortal sword tore through all obstacles and opened up a hole. In the depths of the meditation room, flowers and trees grew, setting off the snow-white painting wall. An ink dragon floated in the air, ready to fly. Chu Danqing saw it from afar and shouted, "Master? Kiki, this blind old man, why don't we kill him?" The abandoned immortal sword laughed strangely. Little and put it away. In front of the painting wall, the surrounding scenery suddenly stabilized and no longer attacked her. Chu Danqing knelt in front of the painting wall. The ink dragon lowered its head as if it was looking at him, but there was only emptiness in its eyes. The ink around him was very faint. Although the battle in the ink sea had not hurt his body, it had affected him greatly. He said in a low voice, "Danqing, you're here?" He then looked up at little Anne. "What do you have to say?" "There's only one question. Do you still want to be our enemy after you escape?" Little and pressed down on the Buddha-slaying sword again. Saving an enemy to fulfill a promise was something that Li Qingshan would do, but she wouldn't. Besides, ensuring that Chu Danqing could safely enter the painting tomb would be considered fulfilling her promise. "So this is your true goal?" Chu Danqing stood up and blocked the painting wall, glaring at her angrily. "Danqing, step down," the Dragon King of the Sea ordered sternly. "Yes, master." Even though Chu Danqing was unwilling, he could only step aside. "If I say I won't, will you believe me?" The Dragon King of the Sea said. "Fellow Taoist disdains lying. Even if it's a lie, you'll keep your word," Little An said. "So, you want to force me to promise not to be your enemy?" With a rumble, a bolt of thunder pierced the sky. Layers of dark clouds gathered, and a storm was about to come. Chu Danqing was very anxious. He knew that his master was proud and aloof and would never be threatened by others, but he was no match for this enemy of Buddha under such circumstances. He didn't expect his master to kill him despite all his efforts. Life and death are mortal matters. You can choose as you please, Dragon King. But I still hope to avoid a fight. But if I kill you, your disciple will seek revenge, and I'll have to kill him. But he's a friend of Qingshan. I don't want to do this unless I have no other choice. In fact, there was another reason. The painting couldn't be eaten. The dragon king of the sea fell silent. The dark clouds grew thicker. Their eyes met, one blank and the other empty. The blankness had a heart, but the emptiness was truly emotionless. Since there was a heart, it couldn't be without concern. For example, this disciple who was ready to risk his life for him, or the dream of flying in the sky and traveling the four seas. Emotionless was almost detached. The person was in the painting, but the heart was outside. The words didn't even seem like a threat, but the embodiment of some rule. The dragon king of the sea sighed, "If Li Qingshan said this to me, I would fight him again no matter what." Qingshan wouldn't say such a thing. "I will never be your enemy again." Little and nodded slightly. She waved her sword to break the painting tomb and was about to leave. "Wait, I wanted to give this painting to Qingshan as a thank you gift. Now I want to give it to you." Chu Danqing looked at her deeply and handed over a scroll of painting. Unfolding the scroll, little Anne's expression changed slightly. Like ripples on the surface of a lake, she stared at the painting without blinking. It turned out to be a painting of Li Qingshan. He stood there casually with his hands on his waist. His long black hair was loose, and there was a bright and proud smile at the corner of his mouth. Although it didn't contain any magic power and was just an ordinary painting, Chu Danqing poured all his effort into it. It was vivid and lifelike, as if the real person was standing in front of him. "I hope you won't forget him." Shaoan returned to her senses and gave a random response. She casually tossed down a pile of paintings and drifted away into the crack. Chu Danqing looked at the hundreds of paintings on the ground and was also dumbfounded. These were nearly 100 magic treasure-level paintings, and they were all thrown to him just like that. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. Was she learning from Qingshan to distinguish kindness and hatred clearly? He took a deep breath and turned to face the painting wall. A brush was already in his hand. He condensed a drop of his heart's blood at the tip of the brush and tapped it on the painting wall. The brush fell silently, and he tapped it twice. With a boom, the painting wall shattered, and the ink dragon soared. The painting mound shook violently. All the scenery turned into rapidly spinning colors in a kaleidoscope, converging toward the vigorous and shocking dragon. Chu Danqing had exhausted all his effort in this one stroke. In a moment of dizziness, his figure fell straight down, landing on the great desert where the curtain of night had fallen. In the ever-changing mirage, the shadow of a dragon shuttled back and forth. Each time it shuttled, it grew larger. At first, the body could still be seen, but later, only scales and claws could be seen. Finally, a huge dragon's head poked out, followed closely by a slender body. It seemed to be soaked in the brilliance of the mirage. In the inky darkness, there were changing colors and more texture. A dragon's roar resounded through the desert. The ink dragon soared into the sky. The painting mound no longer existed, merging with him. The fake thing trapped in the painting could finally roam the world like a real dragon. The stone door of Qing Zhao's abode opened. A ray of moonlight shone into the hollow and dark belly of the mountain, outlining her figure. The abode that she had carefully opened back then seemed so simple and crude. She floated down and unfurled the painting again. Her hand gently brushed past the painting. Even with the profoundness of white bone and great beauty, there was still an aspect that could not be understood. It made one frown involuntarily, and tears welled up in their eyes. The moonlight shone, and clear tears fell like rain. Chapter 12:38. Little and Li Qingshan mumbled to himself as he woke up from his dream. The night sky was boundless, and the stars were vast. He couldn't help but press his chest. There seemed to be a hole there, making him feel very empty. Although he was already the ruler of the world and had everything a man wanted, power, women, wealth, and so on, he even had a long enough lifespan for him to slowly enjoy all of it, but he often felt as if he had just been reborn. He was so lonely and had nothing. When he was fighting for the world, he could finally be distracted and temporarily forget his current situation. Now that the world was unified and peaceful for many years, there was no longer any opponent. Even his greatest enemy, Heaven's will, seemed to have given up. Gu Yenying told him that it was because he became the son of heaven. Li Qingshan's reply at that time was, "I don't have such a stupid father." A more accurate explanation was that, as the ruler of the world, he ruled over all living beings in this world. Everyone in the world was his supporter, and he received the blessings of all living beings. Even the will of heaven could not punish everyone. He didn't want to continue sleeping, so he got up and paced around the room. The ape demon couldn't make him happy either. Instead, it made him even more irritable. The most important person in his life, the most beloved dream, none of them were by his side. In the depths of the palace, light and shadow flowed. Fei Hong held the palace lantern and approached the bedchamber. She looked at his expression and asked carefully, "My king, why are you not happy?" "Fei Hong, I feel so lonely." Li Qingshan sighed heavily. He didn't hide his feelings with shrewdness. "Which princess do you want to sleep with you?" Fei Hong looked at his distressed expression and couldn't help but feel touched. "I don't want to see them. They all have more important things to consider." Li Qingshan waved his hand impatiently. Ever since he became the ruler of the world, those beauties started to look disgusting. For the sake of their families and sex, for power and resources, they used all kinds of schemes and tricks. He finally saw what was called a palace fight. They almost shed all pretense of cordiality between them. Those once innocent and adorable children became more and more obsessed with fighting, turning their innate talents into sharp fangs and claws. Other than themselves, who else was qualified to be their opponent? And that was only the tip of the iceberg. Sure enough, it was just as Gu Yenying had predicted in the past. When there were no enemies outside, the enemies all came from within. Conflicts and disagreements between the various clans were commonplace. Fortunately, Gu Yenying was handling all of this, or the country that had just risen up would have collapsed a long time ago. As for him, he simply slept on his own. Out of sight, out of mind, not giving anyone a chance to talk to him on the pillow. Fei Hong said, "What about choosing a new concubine for you? You'd better spare me. Besides, it's useless even if you find all the women in the world. Could it be that you want to change your taste?" Fei Hong lowered her voice. Li Qingshan slapped her on the head. "Change your head?" Fei Hong rubbed her head with a bitter expression. "Your Majesty, I have no other choice. If you have any other dissatisfaction, I can think of something else. It's too narrow here." Li Qingshan stomped on the ground. Fei Hong looked around the deep and vast palace. Even the palace lantern in her hand could not illuminate it. She said in surprise, "This is narrow? Forget it. You won't understand even if I tell you." Li Qingshan spun around on the spot irritatedly. His tail swayed as he moved. He was like a monkey in a small cage, scratching his ears and cheeks. His heart was beating like a monkey, and the world was like a cage. He suddenly stopped and said with a serious expression, "No, I'm leaving." "It's midnight, where are you going?" "I'm going back to Jiuzhou first and bring little Anne with me. Then I'm going to kill my way to Brother Niu." Li Qingshan's eyes shone, and a smile appeared on his face again. Just thinking about it was enough to thrill him. It was much more interesting than ruling over this world. As he said that, he picked up a swaddle and strode out of the palace. Fei Hong's face was in a mess. What was going on? She could understand every word, but she couldn't understand a single sentence. Which Jojo? Who was little N? Where was the ninth heaven? What did Brother Niu do? When she ran out of the door, Li Qingshan had already disappeared. She could not help but shake her head with a wry smile. He was still the same. The moonlight was as bright as frost. Looking up at the bright moon, she could not help but think of that night many years ago. Unknowingly, so many years had passed. She was no longer that lowly concubine, but a powerful palace manager, a peerless master whose cultivation had reached the 9th level of the innate realm. With the passage of time, everyone had changed, except for him. He was neither a wise king nor a ferocious devil, but a brave and stubborn child. She silently said in her heart, "I wish you a safe journey." It was obviously impossible for Li Qingshan to break through space and return to the 9 provinces with a tap of his left foot. He would directly go find Gu Yenying. As Gu Yenying was concentrating on revising the laws, Li Qingshan suddenly rushed in and pressed his hands on the long table. I want to go back to Jiuzhou. Gu Yenying put down her pen and sighed in her heart. Here he comes again. Qingshan, didn't I say it before? It's not the right time yet. It's rare for us to have a world of our own, so we should train ourselves. You can also accumulate more power for the divine talisman of great creation. I don't care. You brought me here. You have to take responsibility. Otherwise, you have to repay me with your body. Li Qingshan stretched out his arms and grabbed Gu Yenying's shoulders. A soul-deep pain came, and he could not help but cry out in pain. How is it? Gu Yenying said with a smile. Over the years, she had made laws and was in charge of punishments. All death sentences had to be approved by her. She carried out the spirit of legalism in this lawless world, and at the same time, conformed to the will of the Naraka path. Her sensitivity to the scorching wind hell was getting stronger. The pain of hell became more intense, but the strange thing was that the pain she felt gradually eased, reaching a whole new realm. It was as if she was moving from a torturer to an executioner. She believed that if this continued, it would not take long for her to cultivate the illustrations of Naraka scripture to perfection. She would no longer encounter any bottlenecks, and all she lacked was a bigger world. However, she was not in a hurry to return to Jiuzhou, and it was fine even if she did not return. Naturally, she was not as anxious as Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan grimaced in pain, but he refused to let go. Don't think that this little pain can scare me. Either return to Jiuzhou immediately, or pay with your body. Gu Yenying stood up, opened her arms, and asked with a smile, if I agree, are you willing to wait until the time is right? I don't want to. Li Qingshan answered without any hesitation. As expected. Gu Yenying shrugged. All right, let's go back now. Li Qingshan felt strange that she agreed so readily. However, before we leave, there's one more thing I want to try. What is it? Chapter 1239. Become a god? So that's what you're planning. But how are you going to become a deity? This world can't even condense the mountain river divine seal, so how are you going to comprehend the laws of heaven and earth? And even if there is a way, once you become a god, you will have to merge with the world. Wouldn't you be trapped here forever? Li Qingshan frowned, not knowing what she was planning. You have the divine talisman of great creation, which can create all kinds of things. Can't you create a substitute? Even though it will consume some power of will, this is a complete set of the laws of heaven and earth of this world. It's definitely worth a try. Li Qingshan could not help but nod. Even the Banyan Tree King was unable to fully comprehend the laws of heaven and earth of the entire 9 provinces. This was indeed a rare opportunity. Gu Yenying smiled. As for the divine seal of mountains and rivers, don't you have it? You mean the Frost Prefecture Cauldron? After pondering for a moment, Li Qingshan realized that the Frost Prefecture Cauldron he had obtained from the Skyfrost Wolf King was forged from the divine seal of mountains and rivers. Before he could hand it over to the Banyan Tree King, it had been tossed into this world. Exactly. That's the 9 prefectures' divine seal of mountain and river. What does it have to do with this world? Even though there are differences in size between worlds, there are still similarities. The vastness of Shuang province is far beyond this world. How would we know if we don't try? The Frost Prefecture Cauldron has promised to be handed over to the Banyan Tree King. If we can have a complete set of the world's laws as a reference, I believe that the Tree King will be willing to pay this price. All right. Li Qingshan was also persuaded. It had been a long time since he had encountered such an interesting situation. He immediately activated the divine talisman of great creation and forcefully opened the Sumeru ring. He took out a small cauldron. The mountain, river, and grassland of Shuang province were depicted on it, as if it was enveloped in a layer of frost. It was the Frost Prefecture Cauldron. The cauldron emitted a myriad of light rays and began to expand rapidly. Wait, put it back. Gu Yenying tried to stop him, but it was too late. Try putting it back. Li Qingshan couldn't hold the cauldron even if he tried, so he threw it to the ground. A loud bang shook the entire palace. What happened? Fei Hong frowned. He hurried over, only to see a huge cauldron crashing into the palace. And it was still growing. Outside the palace, Gu Yenying looked helpless while Li Qingshan said excitedly, "Big, big, big." The cauldron broke through 100 palaces, and the sound of houses collapsing and collapsing could be heard. When the cauldron finally stopped growing bigger, it could be seen from every corner of the city. It was like a mountain peak. The mouth of the cauldron continuously spewed out rainbow-colored sparks. Streaks of sparks soared into the sky, stirring up halos of light before slowly dissipating. It was like a gorgeous firework, dyeing the sky colorful. "So beautiful!" Li Qingshan shaded his eyes with his hand and exclaimed in admiration. "Guild leader, what's going on?" After a moment of consideration, Fei Hong still decided to ask Gu Yenying. After all these years of experience, she was much more reliable than him most of the time. "Fei Hong, evacuate everyone in the palace. Take my seal and order the Imperial Guards to maintain order in the city and prevent any disturbances." "Yes." A moment later, dark clouds suddenly gathered in the sky and turned into a huge whirlpool. Under the illumination of the rainbow-colored light, it looked like a kaleidoscope, faintly showing all kinds of scenery. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. It struck the mountain-like Shuangzhou cauldron as if it was about to shatter. Gu Yenying's expression changed. "Qingshan, quickly create a substitute. This world is digesting the Shuangzhou cauldron." Digesting? In the past, Li Qingshan had also tried to take out pills and treasures from his Sumeru ring, but they were all suppressed by this world. He didn't expect the Shuangzhou cauldron to have such a big reaction. It seemed like Gu Yenying was right. There was some kind of connection between the worlds. The spirit qi of other worlds would be strongly rejected by this world. However, the divine seal of mountain and river, which had condensed the laws of heaven and earth, was like a glutton encountering a delicious meal. It immediately swallowed and melted, becoming a part of this world. "What kind of substitute do you think can block the lightning?" Li Qingshan pointed upwards, and the huge cauldron was filled with exploding thunderbolts. Millions of electric arcs shot out, and any one of them could kill a Xiantian realm expert. Due to the restrictions of the laws of heaven and earth, the strongest substitute he could create was only at the Xiantian realm 10th stage. It was simply a fool's dream to want to enter the cauldron safely. The cauldron was filled with thunderbolts and turned into a real pool of thunder. Not to mention the substitute, even the real body couldn't withstand it. If this world was so serious about them when they descended, they would have died decades ago. Now, it seemed like they were two little bugs that landed on a fat man who was sleeping soundly. Although the fat man would subconsciously wave them around, he eventually got used to it and simply went back to sleep. After all, although the little bugs were annoying, they didn't bring any harm or benefit to this world. When the Shuangzhou cauldron appeared, it immediately seemed like it was going to wake up. "I miscalculated. I have never tried this kind of thing. Then we can only wait for this world to digest the Shuangzhou cauldron, and then we can slowly go to the world to collect it." Gu Yenying sighed. It was not a simple matter to extract and condense the divine seal from the mountains and rivers. Although this world wasn't big, it still had thousands of mountains and rivers. Moreover, it was still unknown whether they could successfully condense the divine seal. Li Qingshan, who was anxious to return to the 9 prefectures, was probably going to go crazy. Women, oh women, they are usually smarter than the other, but when it comes to the crucial moment, they are unreliable. Li Qingshan shook his head, and his face showed a look of exasperation. Fei Hong rushed back to report, and his mouth twitched as he listened. "If it wasn't for Guild Leader Gu, how could you be so lazy and content all these years?" Gu Yenying was too lazy to argue with him, and asked in surprise, "You still have a way?" "Ha, I have a way." Li Qingshan closed his eyes and opened them again. The smile on his face had disappeared, and his eyes glowed with a faint blue light. It was as tranquil as the deep sea, and he said softly, "Flower in the mirror, moon in the water." Even though he was confined by the laws of this world, the divine talisman of great creation could help him break the confinement and activate his supernatural power. In Fei Hong's surprised eyes, a phantom emerged from Li Qingshan's body and gradually became clear. It was facing him, and it had the same appearance and expression, just like looking into a mirror. It was the mirror doppelganger that he hadn't used for many years. Gu Yenying said, "The doppelganger technique. You do have this move, but your doppelganger seems to be too weak. You might as well use a substitute." Li Qingshan and the mirror doppelganger turned their heads at the same time and smiled at her. "You will know when you see it." The mirror doppelganger immediately rushed to the big cauldron, and it was immediately struck by several thunderbolts, but it was blocked by a rainbow light. Divine talisman of great creation. Gu Yenying's eyes narrowed, and she immediately understood. The mirror doppelganger was almost equivalent to an extension of Li Qingshan's body, so it could naturally activate the divine talisman of great creation to protect itself. The willpower he had accumulated over the years was as deep as the sea, and even if it was struck by lightning, it would not be easy to break this barrier. The mirror doppelganger finally climbed to the top of the big cauldron and jumped into the pool of thunder. "Aren't you afraid of not succeeding and losing the divine talisman of great creation for nothing? Gain and lose, there is no need to worry about it. But this is all your wicked idea, and prepare to pay with your body." Chapter 1240. Li Qingshan no longer spoke. He closed his eyes and focused on controlling the mirror image clone. "Greetings, my king." "Greetings, guild leader." "What's going on?" Figures gathered from all directions as they stared at the mountain-like cauldron in astonishment. "No need to say more, just watch." Gu Yenying waved her hand, and everyone stood solemnly behind them. As they listened to the rumbling thunder, they shivered. They couldn't help but look at Li Qingshan's back. Was he the one who triggered this heavenly might? The Frost Prefecture cauldron was extremely sturdy and was not restricted by the laws of heaven and earth. It stood firmly under the bombardment of the thunder. The earth shook violently. Suddenly, cracks appeared, and lava gushed out. Scarlet flames rushed to the bottom of the Frost Prefecture cauldron. At this moment, besides Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying, no one else dared to stand in front of the cauldron. They retreated far away, still shaken to the core. The world seemed to have turned into a copper cauldron, using fortune as the work, the earth as the anvil, and the thunder as the hammer to refine the Frost Prefecture cauldron. A gust of hot wind blocked the splashing thunder and fire. Gu Yenying stared silently. Only now did she see the so-called heavenly might. However, it also revealed the laws of heaven and earth. Although she could comprehend the laws of heaven and earth through various objects under normal circumstances, she could only comprehend the surface. Just like when a person was angry or drunk, it was easier to reveal his true nature. This was indeed the best time to comprehend the laws of heaven and earth. She didn't know if Li Qingshan could grasp this chance to comprehend the laws of heaven and earth and become a deity of this world. However, becoming a deity with a clone, would it really not affect the main body? Time passed bit by bit. The power of heaven and earth was endless. The Frost Prefecture cauldron also couldn't hold on any longer. With a crack appeared at the bottom and quickly spread. Li Qingshan's expression changed slightly. A rainbow light burst out from the crack. Wherever the Frost Prefecture cauldron cracked, the rainbow light would shoot out, as if trying to repair the crack. But Gu Yenying could see it. He was fighting against time with this world to refine the Frost Prefecture cauldron first. Finally, the Frost Province cauldron was covered in cracks. Millions of rainbow-colored lights shot out from within and dyed the entire cauldron reds. Time seemed to stop for a moment, and then there was a loud bang. The huge cauldron exploded into pieces, and ring-shaped shockwaves swept out for thousands of miles. Circles of rainbow light expanded along with it, dyeing the sky incomparably beautiful. However, the fragments of the cauldron melted in midair like ice cubes, swallowed and melted by this world. The sky began to brighten, and the heavenly thunder and earthly fire gradually subsided. The tens of thousands of palaces were burned down by the lava, and ashes fell all over the city. Fortunately, there were countless experts in the city, and reinforcements came in time. Only then did it not turn into a burning city. Above the ruins, Li Qingshan slowly opened his eyes, which were clear and bright. It was as if it could pierce through everything in the world. Gu Yenying asked, "How is it?" "It's hard to say, but the divine talisman of great creation has been lost. Hurry up and repay me with your body," Li Qingshan said. As soon as his mirror clone entered the Frost Province cauldron, he used the power of the divine talisman of great creation to power the spirit turtle transformation to derive the laws of the world. At the same time, he had to fend off the lightning and the roasting of the earthly fire. Afterwards, he had to fight against time with this world to refine the Frost Province cauldron. The power of belief he had accumulated over all these years basically flowed out like water. Fortunately, he had personally shattered the Mist Province cauldron in the past, and he had even eaten a fruit of wisdom, so he had quite a deep understanding of the laws of the 9 provinces. As a result, the refinement process was relatively smooth. In the end, he managed to refine the Frost Province cauldron first. However, the Frost Province cauldron was unable to endure the attacks of the heavenly thunder and earthly fire anymore. It shattered loudly, swallowed and melted away by the world. Even his mirror clone and the divine talisman of great creation were swallowed up together. Cut the nonsense. How is it? I don't know how to describe my current state either. On one hand, I'm standing here before you, and on the other hand, I'm roaming the world, existing with the world. I can dive into the deep sea or climb to the top of a mountain with a single thought. Yep, there's a woman sleeping naked here. Not bad, but her stomach isn't too good. Li Qingshan was originally solemn, like an observer from beyond the mortal world. His final sentence immediately exposed his true nature. Gu Yenying shot a glance at him in exasperation. What else? I also see endless laws, but I can only walk around and look around. I don't seem to be a god. This was the first time Li Qingshan had experienced such a wondrous state in his life. He focused his gaze on Gu Yenying, but all he saw was a whistling, scorching wind from hell wrapped around a pale, green feather. He could not help but feel rather disappointed. He had never thought this guy would have already cultivated the illustrations of the Naraka to such a level, basically existing with hell. Just by looking at his expression, Gu Yenying knew what he was thinking. Finally, she could not help but swing her iron fan and hit him hard on the head. Li Qingshan realized that he could not see Gu Yenying clearly, so he continued to roam the world. Unexpectedly, he was hit. He touched his head and said, "Why did you hit me? I didn't see anything." Gu Yenying looked at his angry and wronged face and really had no temper. She sighed and said, "You're almost omniscient in this world now. This is already the ability of a god." Yep, that makes sense. After all, the time is too short. I still can't understand all the laws of heaven and earth, so it's naturally difficult for me to control the power of heaven and earth. Li Qingshan nodded and suddenly patted her head. "Hey, it's not that I don't want to repay you, it's just that it's not time yet." Gu Yenying held her forehead and was speechless for a long time. She felt that in front of so many people, she really could not lower herself to his level. But will your clone really not affect your main body? Don't be assimilated by this world. After all, no matter how strong the power that he grasped in this world was, he could not bring it back to the 9 prefectures. If he was assimilated by the world, it would be much more terrifying than being rejected by the world. It's just a flower in the mirror, the moon in the water. Of course, it won't affect my main body. Sai, you don't seem to be affected. Gu Yenying sighed in her heart. Who would continue to peep at a woman in this state? He had long been immersed in the endless mysteries of the laws of heaven and earth, and everything in the secular world was like fleeting clouds. She really admired his temperament. How could he be so stubborn? But you don't know, this is really very interesting. It's like playing a game. Li Qingshan thought of the sandbox games in his previous life. However, the largest of those games was only a city, and the degree of realism was also very limited. This was an entire world. It was so detailed that every grain of sand and every grain of dust was detailed. I've never heard of such a game, but your magical power is really mysterious. Gu Yenying praised. Is that so? Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. Apart from being able to conceal his identity in the beginning, Moon's reflection actually became less and less useful to him later on. As his identity was exposed, the enemies he faced became stronger and stronger. His doppelganger could only be used as a shield. He really felt that it was of little value. This was because he lacked understanding. In fact, the doppelganger technique was not a particularly advanced spell. There were even some Qi practitioners who were able to use them, but they could only be used in battle. There was a limit to how far they could go, making them more like puppets. Only extremely powerful cultivators. Only then would there be a true doppelganger that could replace the main body and travel the world. However, such a doppelganger would definitely affect the main body, and there was a risk that the will of the main body and the doppelganger would not be in sync. It could even create a will that would separate from the main body, and that would be a huge loss. His mirror avatar, on the other hand, was almost an extension of his body, so there was no problem of coordinating his will. Instead, it had a strange self-protection mechanism to prevent the main body from being affected by the doppelganger. No matter how much the shadow was distorted by the mirror and water, the flower and moon would remain unaffected. If his true body became a deity, his mind would definitely be greatly affected. How could the vastness of the world not have an impact on a person's mind? This was a talent passed down in the bloodline of the spirit turtle race. When the spirit turtle hid in the deep sea and controlled the doppelganger to travel, if the doppelganger casually separated from the main body, or if someone injured the main body through the doppelganger, then what was the point of the doppelganger? What was the point of having a doppelganger? How could he not nip such a risk in the bud? Only by creating such a mirror avatar. Only then could he ensure that he was always in the safest position. If Li Qingshan knew about this, he would definitely sigh. The spirit turtle really was a natural-born shut-in. This water mirror was basically like a computer screen, forming a barrier that completely isolated the world. Everyone gathered again and asked what was going on. A young man stepped out from the crowd. His back was slightly protruding, and his figure was broad. His face was extremely handsome, and he bore some resemblance to Li Qingshan. He clasped his hands and said, "Father, Mother invites you to the Xuanshu temple." "What is it?" As Li Qingshan asked, he already saw Yang Miaozhen in the Xuanshu temple. He already understood the answer. Someone was finally leaving him. As the world changed, people's hearts changed. He was not the only one who could abandon others. Suddenly, Yang Miaozhen's heart skipped a beat. She stood up and looked around. How sharp. Is it because she's about to ascend? Li Qingshan praised inside. Among the girls, Yang Miaozhen was undeniably the best in terms of talent, comprehension, and willpower. She had been focused on cultivation all these years, without a single day of rest. She did not care about the struggles of the world at all. Even Hu Xian'er, who did not have a family or sect to hold her back, felt jealous. Only she had always been very indifferent. However, it was precisely because of this indifference that they had gradually drifted apart. Even when Li Qingshan summoned her, she often refused. She had reached the 10th level of Qi refining, the highest realm, and was only a step away from ascending. The change in the sky last night had given her quite a bit of inspiration. She had glimpsed a trace of the laws of heaven and earth. She was about to ascend, so she ordered her son to invite Li Qingshan. The Black Tortoise city of the past, the Zhongdu city of today, was not far from the Xuanshu temple. Li Qingshan did not make her wait long. The sky had just brightened when he stood in front of her. He said with a smile, "Congratulations, congratulations. You really haven't changed at all, but I've aged a lot." Yang Miaozhen gazed at the man in front of her. He did not seem to have changed at all from many years ago. Not only his appearance, but even his mood was the same. However, her heart already felt many vicissitudes of life. Li Qingshan also said, "You've aged a lot." In reality, her appearance had not changed much. Due to the effects of the Yi-Wood vitality art, there was not a single wrinkle on her face, and there was not a single strand of white hair on her head. Her figure was still as tall and slender as before. However, she was still old. After all, she was only a mortal and did not have a powerful bloodline. This world did not have that many elixirs that could extend one's lifespan. Once one aged to a certain extent, that was death. Even if her appearance was still that of a young girl, death was still death. Chapter 1241. Li Qingshan still had a faint smile on his face. Even though he was a little sad, he did not feel sad. The ape demon fishing for the moon was destined to be an illusion. Why should he be sad for the moment when the moonlight flowed into his palm? We are husband and wife. Don't you have anything to say to me? Yang Miaozhen could not help but ask. The man in front of her had once made her so infatuated that she even gave birth to a child for him. I do have a lot to say to you, but we are not husband and wife. I wanted to leave you, but I didn't expect you to be one step ahead of me. Not? Yang Miaozhen also felt a stab of pain in her heart. Li Qingshan said with certainty, no. I once had a woman I wanted to marry, but in the end, I let her down. I thought I could take her to travel the world, but in the end, I realized that it was my wishful thinking. From that day on, I swore that I would never marry again, and I would never make any vows of eternal love to anyone. For people of my generation, the vicissitudes of life are too easy. Yang Miaozhen finally understood why he only had concubines but never held any wedding. She originally thought that he was too jumpy and could not stand these red tape. She sighed faintly and said, I see. So that's how it is. I've never heard you say these words before. Li Qingshan said with a smile, I am not stupid. Why do I have to say these annoying words? Why are you not afraid of annoying me today? No matter how indifferent you appear, I know that you are a person who values relationships. I am afraid that there is still something in your heart that you can't give up, and it will affect your ascension. After all, you are a woman. There are very few women like Gu Yenying. So, do you like President Gu or me? Li Qingshan shook his head. Let's not talk about this. Sit down and listen to me. You've only just started after you've ascended. So the two sat opposite each other, one talking and the other listening. From the matters to pay attention to during the tribulation, to the cultivation methods after ascension, to battles between cultivators, Li Qingshan passed on all the knowledge he could possibly use to Yang Miaozhen, no matter how trivial it was. He was like a master passing down instructions to his disciple who was about to leave seclusion. Yang Miaozhen asked from time to time. It was no longer a prince and a concubine, but a senior and a junior. The two cultivators were communicating. Unknowingly, the faint sorrow of parting had been completely washed away, and it was instead filled with yearning and hope for the future. 3 days later, thunder roared. Yang Miaozhen soared into the sky to resist the tribulation lightning. A moment later, the thunderclouds dissipated. Yang Miaozhen looked back at Li Qingshan, nodded slightly, and disappeared into the horizon. From then on, they were separated from the boundless void and separated in the vast sea of stars. It was likely that they would never meet again. It wasn't that they were fickle, but that they had greater pursuits and wished each other well. It was better than remembering a mound. Li Qingshan silently said, Miaozhen, have a safe journey. He turned around and returned to Zhongdu City, using his clone to observe the heavenly tribulation of ascension. He had gained a better understanding of the laws of heaven and earth in this world. He needed to properly comprehend it. When he left this world in the future, it should be of great help. After devouring the Frost Prefecture cauldron, this world began to undergo subtle changes. However, these changes were not immediate. Instead, they were subtle. Perhaps one day in the future, the mountains and rivers of this world could also condense into the divine seal of mountains and rivers, or even evolve into a wider world. However, that was a matter for thousands of years later. And Li Qingshan finally did not feel bored anymore. In Zhongdu City, the palace that had been destroyed by the heavenly lightning and earthly fire was quickly rebuilt. It had a distinct Qingzhou style, especially a huge statue standing in the square with a long saber on its back, looking into the distance. It was the appearance of Li Qingshan. Passers-by who passed by had to pay their respects. Deep in the palace, Li Qingshan was lying on the bed with his head propped up. Snacks were placed all around him. There were peanuts, melon seeds, fruits, and pastries. He casually grabbed them and sent them into his mouth. There was a mysterious smile on his face, and he looked like he was daydreaming. his hand touched nothing on the plate and immediately shouted, "Fei Hong melon seeds?" Fei Hong helplessly served the melon seeds and conveniently cleaned up the melon seed shells that were piled up on the floor. This was the confidential place where Gu Yenying worked. Ordinary maids did not have the qualifications to enter. Only she, the chief steward, was able to personally serve this chivalrous king. From that day onwards, Li Qingshan became even more lazy. In the past, he would often stroll around. Now, he was practically lying on the bed without moving. He did not sleep for days and nights, and actually had a pair of dark circles under his eyes. He was the invincible chivalrous king with unparalleled martial arts. Haha! Li Qingshan suddenly burst into laughter, startling Fei Hong. However, she saw that his eyes were empty and not looking at anything. She could not help but sigh heavily. She looked at Gu Yenying, who was concentrating on handling official business, and asked, "Guild leader Gu, is His Highness really all right? You don't need to worry about him. He is currently comprehending the laws of heaven and earth." Comprehending the laws of heaven and earth? Fei Hong looked at Li Qingshan again and saw that the smile on his face had disappeared. Instead, it had become somewhat lascivious. In this world, no matter what one did, they could not do without comprehending the laws of heaven and earth. She had never seen someone who comprehended the laws of heaven and earth like this. She could not help but shake her head and leave. Without raising her head, Gu Yenying asked, "Qingshan, take a look at the southern part of the Southern Territory. I just received news that there are a few cave masters there who do not seem to be very peaceful." "Ah, wait a moment. Oh, I see them. The group of country bumpkins from the 72 caves have gathered a large group of natives for a meeting. They say that your new laws are too harsh, and they are thinking of ways to resist it. After so many years, there were no longer any organizations that dared to go against the world society. However, all kinds of opportunistic and covert actions were still unavoidable. The laws that were issued would often become unrecognizable when they reached the lower levels. Some people would even take advantage of the situation and damage the reputation of the world society. The reason why Gu Yenying arranged for Li Qingshan to stay here was to use him as a super monitor. There was nothing in the world that could be hidden from him. He could immediately understand the most real situation and then use targeted methods to amend the laws in a timely manner. At the same time, he would maintain the dignity of the laws and make them more compatible with the path of hell. Following Li Qingshan's comprehension of the laws of heaven and earth, it was no longer as simple as observing the present. It even included the past and the future. In the blink of an eye, he could know the cause and effect of a matter. He could even pry into the most subtle changes in people's hearts. He could also multitask and monitor the happenings in various places at the same time. This was indeed the means of the gods. However, he used this ability like a TV show. From the romance of the rich and powerful to the romance of the countryside, from the world of animals to man and nature, every channel was full of fun and required him to keep track of it. In addition, there were several those programs that he watched a lot as well. The only thing that made Gu Yenying feel fortunate was that he finally stopped making a fuss about returning to the 9 prefectures. Li Qingshan seemed to have sensed something and suddenly said, "Gu Yenying, once I understand the laws of heaven and earth in this world, we will return to the 9 prefectures. Don't even think about delaying it." "All right, please continue." Chapter 1242. Spring rain, summer thunder, autumn wind, winter snow, the 4 seasons changed. Amidst the tribulation lightning, Li Qingshan saw off his old friends one by one. He asked the infant Rahu and Xiaoming, "Where do you think they'll ascend to?" Luo Ho Xiaoming had become so small that he was even smaller than a newborn baby. Li Qingshan could carry him with one hand. His skin had also turned pink. Most of the time, his eyes were closed as if he was a sleeping baby. However, his brows were always furrowed, and his expression was sometimes twisted to the point of being ferocious. He was sweating so much that his swaddling clothes would be soaked in a second. It was as if he was in a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. Li Qingshan would always wake him up at this time and ask him something. So, Luo Ho Xiaoming opened his eyes. His eyes were as bright as rubies, but they were covered with a layer of mist. After a moment of confusion, he came back to his senses. His lips moved, and he answered vaguely, 6 paths of reincarnation. Just as I expected. Li Qingshan nodded. Not long ago, an Asura under his command ascended. Through the mirror image's perspective, he clearly saw a blood-colored vortex blossoming in the void and swallowing the Asura. Originally, he thought that ascending from a small world to a medium world, and then from a medium world to a great world. Now, it seemed that this 6 paths of reincarnation was the final destination of all the worlds in the void, whether it was life or death. It was understandable. Of course, ascenders couldn't cross the void to another world. Only the 6 paths of reincarnation was connected to every world, and only then would there be the possibility of ascending. However, what kind of form the 6 paths of reincarnation existed in was still something that Li Qingshan couldn't understand. But now, he gradually understood this world. Luo Ho Xiaoming fell asleep again. His expression gradually became ferocious, even filled with terror. Asura had always been known for their bravery and fearlessness. But what could make this Asura's divine son show such an expression? His nightmare became deeper and deeper, so deep that even Li Qingshan couldn't wake him up anymore. His breath also became weaker and weaker until it was almost non-existent. One day, after an extremely long slumber, so long that Li Qingshan thought he would never wake up again, he suddenly opened his eyes and bawled like an infant. He was filled with endless sorrow and bitterness. Li Qingshan was surprised. He picked up the swaddling clothes in a hurry, but he caught a whiff of blood. He opened the swaddling clothes and took a look. The tender skin cracked as droplets of blood dripped out, igniting red lotuses. His instinctive sense of danger made him let go of Luo Ho and Xiaoming, retreating far away. The red lotus flames actually gave him a feeling even more terrifying than Xiao and Samadhi flames of white bone. They seemed to possess a law that was even more profound and ancient than the laws of the world. It could not be defied, passing through all the worlds in the world. It was this law that backfired on this Asura's divine son who once had supreme divine power. Gu Yenying, who was focused on revising the new law, was also stunned. She stared at the blooming red lotuses and felt that even the law of the Naraka realm couldn't compare to the law contained in the red lotuses. Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying both held their breaths. After the red lotuses bloomed to their peak, they all began to wither. Little Luoho's crying stopped, and he spat out a red lotus. This red lotus was larger than all the other red lotuses, and its petals bloomed. It was as big as a wash basin, and there was a baby lying within it. Surprisingly, this baby also looked like little Luoho, and he had a happy smile on his face, without a hint of sorrow. Looking at the bottom of the lotus, little Luoho had already turned into ashes. The last lotus flower also slowly withered and finally dissipated. All of this happened in just a moment. The baby crawled up from the ground and looked at himself with a satisfied expression. He put his hands on his waist and proudly showed off the little elephant under him. In that moment, he washed away all of his melancholy and dejection. He pointed at Li Qingshan arrogantly. Li Qingshan, get me something to eat. I want fresh milk and grapes. Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying looked at each other. They still didn't understand what was going on. There seemed to be some shocking change happening to Luo Ho Xiaoming, but it only looked like he had become more arrogant. Li Qingshan said tentatively, Little Ming? Ming is Ming, but remove the word little. From today onwards, I am Luo Xiaoming. Okay, Little Ming. It's Luo Ho Xiaoming. Luo Ho Xiaoming's expression darkened. No problem, Little Ming. Bastard. Luo Ho Xiaoming glared at Li Qingshan. His eyes were full of fighting spirit, just like a real Asura. Li Qingshan slowly approached him and squatted down. He tentatively extended his right hand and curled his middle finger. What are you trying to do? Don't you dare. Luo Ho Xiaoming's body swayed as he tried to avoid Li Qingshan's hand. But Li Qingshan flicked Luo Ho Xiaoming's forehead. Luo Ho Xiaoming fell to the ground, his face red with anger. Li Qingshan scratched his chin and chuckled. I thought you suddenly gained some amazing ability, but it turns out you're only SOS. Luo Ho Xiaoming sat on the ground. Li Qingshan, I definitely won't forgive you in the future. Li Qingshan slowly curled his middle finger. Luo Ho Xiaoming decided that a wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. Li Qingshan ordered someone to bring fresh milk and grapes. Luo Ho Xiaoming immediately ignored everything else and started to eat and drink. Gu Yenying asked curiously, "Little Ming, what kind of fire is that just now?" Luo Ho Xiaoming said angrily, "Red Lotus karmic fire." Then he said seriously, "We have to leave this place quickly." But Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. This was really the case of the eunuchs panicking instead of the emperor. "Have you noticed any changes in me?" Luo Ho Xiaoming clenched his fists. "You're growing up." Gu Yenying keenly noticed that Luo Ho Xiaoming had more hair on his head than when he was born from the Red Lotus karmic fire. His speech was also clearer. But Li Qingshan noticed even more. Originally, although Luo Ho Xiaoming was not rejected by this world, he was not accepted by it either. But ever since he was reborn from the Red Lotus karmic fire, the heaven and earth spiritual chi had been gathering towards him. It was simply unstoppable. That's right. If this continues, it won't be long before I face the first heavenly tribulation. I can't ascend in this world, or I'll return to the Azura realm. Luo Ho Xiaoming said. Chapter 1243. Li Qingshan glared at Gu Yenying angrily with his thick eyebrows raised. He clenched and then opened his hands as he stared at her slender and beautiful neck. Strong winds blew in the sky, dark clouds rolled, and thunder rumbled. His anger had changed the color of the wind and clouds. Gu Yenying knew that he was truly angry. She hurriedly explained, "When we came here, we only relied on the rock feather to make decisions. We randomly chose a small world in the void. It's not easy to return the way we came. Then why don't you let the Kunpeng's feather make the decision again?" Li Qingshan barked. Thunder suddenly boomed outside the room. Gu Yenying smiled bitterly. Although the rock feather is a spiritual object, it doesn't have any intelligence. Now that I've inherited part of its inheritance, it can't make decisions on its own. "So, you've been fooling me all this time? No wonder you've been delaying your return." Gu Yenying, "Oh, Gu Yenying, I've trusted you all this time. How dare you treat me like this?" Li Qingshan took a step forward. His fangs were protruding, and his face was full of ferocity. The thunder rumbled, and the lightning flickered on his face. A few tiger stripes were faintly discernible. It was obvious that he really wanted to kill her. Gu Yenying sighed in her heart. She knew that if she didn't deal with this properly, her life might be in danger. No matter how casual he seemed to be, there was a fierce tiger in his heart. If he was really angered, he would not be soft-hearted. By then, paying with my body would no longer be a joke. She would really have to pay with her body. If she passed through the void and overcame all the hardships, it would be a great tragedy if she died in his hands in the end. Qingshan, I only found out about it not long ago. I didn't mean to deceive you. I originally wanted to wait for you to become a true god of the world. Then, I might be able to completely inherit the rock's inheritance and find the way back. Hey, he can wait but I can't. Luo Ho Xiaoming knew the origin of that feather. He knew that with Gu Yenying's cultivation base, it would take more than 8 to 10 years for her to inherit the inheritance. Not to mention in such a world. Shut up, Li Qingshan shouted. Luo Ho Xiaoming shrugged. He had learned this action from Li Qingshan, indicating that it didn't matter at all. In any case, as long as he didn't return to the Azura realm, he could just go to a bigger worlds. As for Gu Yenying, perhaps it didn't matter if he returned to the 9 regions or not. Only Li Qingshan had to go back to find little, and Luo Ho Xiaoming continued, even if there's a path, it's still not enough. I also advise you to stop looking for your original world. You have no idea how many dangers there are in the void. Last time, it was the Kunpeng's feather that helped you choose the best route. Was this still the best route? You should learn to be smarter. Little Ming, you asked for this yourself. Li Qingshan reached out and grabbed Luo Ho Xiaoming. He aimed at his butt and slapped him hard. Outside the door, torrential rain poured down. Luo Ho Xiaoming cursed and struggled with all his might. As a dignified divine child, When had he ever suffered such humiliation? Gu Yenying didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She recalled what Li Qingshan had said before, beating a child on a rainy day is nothing to do anyway. Her heart was filled with regret for both of them. If it weren't for her, Li Qingshan wouldn't have landed in this world. And Luo Ho Xiaoming had completely taken the blame for her, bearing Li Qingshan's monstrous anger. The wildflower saber and the slingshot named Little Ye were quietly placed on the bed. They even talked to each other and felt deeply ashamed. These two people were too shameless. This was their first confrontation, and it ended with Li Qingshan's complete victory. However, Luo Ho Xiaoming also cursed all 8 generations of his ancestors. At this moment he was staring at Li Qingshan with murderous eyes. Li Qingshan completely ignored him. He took a deep breath and regained his composure. His eyes were tranquil and distant. At crucial times, women really can't be relied on. Yes, children can't be relied on either. Gu Yenying pinched the bridge of her nose and was speechless. Actually, this had nothing to do with men or women, old or young. Crossing the void with the cultivation of a level 3 heavenly tribulation and traveling back and forth between 2 incomparably distant worlds was like asking a child to cross a desert without any preparation. All he could rely on was that Kunpeng's feather. Moreover, he couldn't completely control this only means of transportation. We'll leave tomorrow. I'll deduce the route. Qingshan, you know it's impossible for you to deduce it. Gu Yenying frowned. No matter how much she believed in Li Qingshan's methods, she still had basic common sense. The distance between these 2 worlds was probably millions of miles. Moreover, it wasn't a straight line. Who knew how many twists and turns it contained information that was even more complicated than the laws of this world. Once we leave this world, my power will recover and I can start to deduce. Although I can't deduce the entire route at once, I can use the changes in the celestial bodies to reduce the difficulty of the deduction. Li Qingshan's expression was calm. He spoke as if it was an extremely ordinary matter, as if he was just walking while searching for the route. This is practically suicide. Gu Yenying couldn't help but comment like this. With such a great distance between them, as long as there was a slight deviation in the deduction, they would never be able to reach their destination. Moreover, deduction consumed a large amount of spiritual power. The void couldn't supply it at all. This is what you promised me. Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. Then he retracted his expression and said, if you don't want to leave, I can't force you. Let's just say that our fate has come to an end. From now on, you walk your own path and I'll walk mine. Let's part ways here. Gu Yenying felt as if her heart was stabbed, but without the Kunpeng's feather, how are you going to? Li Qingshan said with determination, I will return to the 9 continents through the 6 paths of reincarnation. Luo Ho Xiaoming couldn't help but mock him. Huh? What a joke. This plan is even more stupid than the one just now. Do you know how big the 6 paths of reincarnation is? Do you think that just because the 6 paths of reincarnation is connected to the other worlds, you can use it as a bridge? No matter how dangerous it is, I must return to the 9 continents. Little N is waiting for me there. I've made her wait for too long. Li Qingshan strode out of the door. The thunderstorm came and went quickly. In the blink of an eye, the clouds had dispersed, and the vast star river became even more dazzling. At this very moment, she was waiting for his return somewhere on the other side of the star river. He had never doubted this. Thus, this endless river of stars gained meaning and merged into his chest. Suddenly, Gu Yenying's voice sounded behind him. Then let's go. Li Qingshan turned around and saw a smile on her lips. She was as graceful as the wind, so he smiled back. Have you gone mad? Luo Ho Xiaoming was shocked. If he wanted to leave this world, his biggest reliance was Gu Yenying. If she left this world, he would have to follow her. Li Qingshan asked, Are you afraid? Luo Ho Xiaoming's eyes moved back and forth between Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying. They seemed to be glowing with a light that even he, a former god, had to face. You 2 damned bastards. Chapter 1244. In the deep winter, in the north. The night sky was clear as if it had been washed, and the moonlight was as bright as frost. It shone on the vast forest, and the snow was surging. A lone peak stood on the snowy plains of the forest. The words "World Sword Sect" were deeply engraved on the precipice, overlooking the world in the south. There was a commotion in the forest, and a young man jumped out of the forest. He looked up at the four big words and smiled scornfully. His face was handsome, and his short black hair was mixed with golden luster. His eyes were round, and he seemed to be quick-witted. Then he landed lightly on the snow without leaving a trace. His eyes fell on the back of a tall man at the bottom of the precipice, and he showed a complicated expression. There was kindness and respect from the bottom of his heart, but there was also resentment and dissatisfaction. But there was one thing that was beyond doubt. In his heart, this man was far more lofty than the lone peak, and even somewhat unattainable. So, he walked forward and bowed. "Father?" Li Qingshan looked back and smiled. "My son, you are indeed the first to come." This young man was his youngest monkey child. "How could I not come early when father summoned me? But if it was in the past, you would definitely jump on my back." There was a hint of nostalgia in Li Qingshan's eyes. Humans were not plants, and how could they be emotionless? "Father, are you really going to leave?" The young man was suddenly filled with reluctance. The person in front of him was not only the world-famous hero king, but also his father. Li Qingshan waved his hand. "I'm afraid your brothers and sisters will only arrive after a while. Go and catch some game. I want a drink." The young man responded, turned around, and went into the forest. After a while, he came back carrying a big brown bear. There were 3 more people next to Li Qingshan, and they all smiled and greeted him. One of them said, "The youngest, you are so attentive." The young man snorted and went to deal with the bear meat. Li Qingshan then ordered the 3 people to find some firewood. When the bonfire was lit, and the bear meat was still emitting a fragrance, there were already people at the bottom of the precipice. There were men and women. They were all outstanding people, standing or sitting. They kept their distance from each other. They were all princes and princesses who had inherited the most outstanding bloodline in this world. They possessed miraculous powers that ordinary people did not have, even if their cultivation was higher than theirs. It was also very difficult to defeat them. Not to mention that there were many of them. He had already reached the pinnacle of cultivation and would definitely become the ruler of this world. The only reason he wasn't yet was because he was a paragon. Their father was still sitting there. And everyone knew that he wouldn't stay here for long. Half a year ago, the leader of the world society, Gu Yenying, handed over the reins of power and ended the rule that had lasted for decades. Then she announced that she was going to leave this world. The world was in turmoil because of this. Fortunately, the laws that she had spent decades establishing ensured basic stability. Moreover, the hero king was still around, so who dared to cause trouble? However, the work that was once done by her now required the cooperation of dozens of people. Most importantly, there was a lack of a decision-maker. The world needed a new king. Those who were qualified were among them. It was not just because of their status. After all, this was a world where the strong ruled. If one did not have enough power, no matter how virtuous he would not be able to sit firmly on the throne. Therefore, they were the only ones who could compete for this position. As a result, not to mention half-sisters, even brothers of the same father and mother were wary of each other. They also believed that the reason why Li Qingshan had gathered all the disciples tonight was to choose one of them to inherit the hero king's position. They were even more displeased with the others. Li Qingshan seemed to be unaware of all this. He smiled and ordered, "Hu Chen, cut the meat. Feng Xian, come and pour some wine for your father." A bare-chested man with a curly beard came forward. He pulled out a long knife from his waist and cut out the bloody heart of the bear, offering it to Li Qingshan. Then he cut off a bear's paw and began to chew on it, as if there was no one else around. Other than Li Qingshan, no one was qualified to have his service. The others showed dissatisfaction, but they knew that his temperament had always been like this. Although his cultivation was not the best among his siblings, no one had the confidence to defeat him in a one-on-one fight. A girl wearing a pure gold phoenix crown and a gorgeous dress walked over with her mouth pouted. Obviously, she was not willing to do this kind of thing. Anyway, she did not want to be the hero king, so she was not willing to suck up to the old man. Li Huchen and Li Fengxian inherited the bloodline of the tiger devil and the phoenix respectively. They were unique among all the disciples. They were also the most arrogant, so Li Qingshan loved to order them around. He said that he wanted to get rid of their arrogance, but no one believed this explanation. From the bottom of their hearts, they thought that the old man was just bullying them. Their youngest son had already grown into a teenager and had a rebellious heart. Many of them, using the lifespan of mortals, had already entered middle age. They were no longer the innocent children they used to be. Even if it was Li Qingshan's orders, they would not obey him from the bottom of their hearts. Of course, this was exactly what Li Qingshan wanted. Loyal ministers and filial sons were the most boring of all. He shook his head with a smile and bit off a third of the bear's heart. He chewed carelessly a few times before swallowing it all in one gulp. He drank all the alcohol in the goblet. Guanyin, divide the meat. Yes, father. The young man who had once helped Yang Miaozhen pass on the news walked over. After a moment of thought, he divided the bear meat piece by piece with his fingers like a knife. None of them were dissatisfied. Clearly, this was not just because he had thought it through thoroughly enough. There was no dispute over the division. Li Guanyin was the only one who had inherited the spirit turtle's bloodline, as well as the only one who had no interest in the power of the world. Instead, he was very similar to his mother, Yang Miaozhen. He was completely focused on the path, and he possessed the spirit turtle's forbearance and cunning. As a result, he was the only one who did not have any enemies even though he was not very old among the disciples. Li Qingshan glanced at the disciples. Apart from the three of them, most of them were monkey cubs. This was obviously because the demonic ape bloodline had the absolute advantage, and their personalities were free and unrestrained. The remaining few were calves. Their personalities were much calmer, but they were all very stubborn. One of them was bare-headed. He was the only one who did not receive the bear meat because he wanted to become a monk. Who knew how many times he had been beaten by Li Qingshan, but in the end he still became a monk. He was very strict with his precepts. Currently, he was chanting scriptures with his palms together, helping the poor bear to ascend to the afterlife. Li Qingshan suspected that he was fated with Buddhism, but he failed to convert to Buddhism in the end, which was why he gave birth to such a freak. He picked up a ball of snow and rubbed his hands. He stood up and gazed at the peak of the mountain. Children, eat and drink your fill. Warm up. Prepare to climb the mountain with me. Be careful not to fall. Do what you can. If you can't go up, then stay here. If you fall to your death, don't blame me for not warning you. The disciples thought he was joking again. It was just a mountain. How could they fall? Even the youngest one had the lowest cultivation. His cultivation was also the lowest, so he didn't find this difficult. He had grown up climbing mountains and climbing trees. Li Guanyin suddenly looked to the north. He lowered his head and said, "Royal father, I want to stay here. Son of a turtle, you have always been the smartest." Li Qingshan still treated him like a child. He patted his head. But not everything can be divined. If you blindly seek good fortune and avoid disaster, you will miss out on a lot of wonderful things. Li Guanyin was deep in thought. He suddenly looked up at him, as if he had understood something. Then I will go too. Simply climbing the mountain was not a problem for him. But as he spoke, a dark cloud swept over from the north. It covered the stars and the moon, and snowflakes drifted down. Let's go. Li Qingshan climbed up the precipice. The disciples followed closely behind. Only Li Fengxian spread her wings and fluttered around. She was proud of being able to fly. But when the light snow turned into heavy snow, then into a blizzard, and the wind howled between heaven and earth, she could not fly like this anymore. After all, she was not a real phoenix. With her current cultivation, the human body was still too heavy. She could only climb the rock wall in a sorry state. She shouted at Li Qingshan, "You must have divined it correctly." Li Qingshan laughed loudly. He opened his arms to the sky. "Let the blizzard come more fiercely. As if the heavens heard his voice, the wind became more and more violent. The sea of trees rose and fell violently. Snow was no longer falling. Instead, it rolled between heaven and earth. Even the thick layer of snow was swept up. With a crack, a towering tree that towered above the sea of trees was actually snapped in half. It was swept up by the wind and landed dozens of miles away. Facing the might of heaven and earth, even the princes and princesses were as insignificant as mortals. Not only did it make climbing extremely difficult, the plummeting temperature made it even worse. Originally, no one cared about the cold. With their physiques, they were almost impervious to heat and cold. None of them wore winter clothes. Just now, their breaths turned into ice. They knew how powerful it was. They could only use a breath of true energy to resist the cold, but it was quickly consuming their true energy. Li Qingshan purposefully chose the most dangerous path. He even purposefully took a winding path. Everyone believed that this was a test. Even if it was not for the power of the world, for the dignity of the princes and princesses, no one gave up. The team gradually stretched into a long, winding line. The lips of the youngster at the end of the line were blue from the cold. His hands did not listen to him. The figures of his elder brother and sister were blurred in the wind and snow. He could not see his father walking at the front. He looked down. Other than the wind and snow, he could not see anything. He did not know how high he had climbed. If he fell, he would definitely be smashed to pieces. He could only grit his teeth and continue to climb. In an instant, all the figures in front of him disappeared. Other than the howling of the wind and snow, he could not hear anything else. It was as if he was the only one left in the world. The blood in his body seemed to be about to freeze. Suddenly, a rock that he was holding loosened and fell. This was a common thing when climbing. However, his stiff body did not allow him to change his movement. He lost his center of gravity and fell straight down. Ah! The youngest! Li Fengxian suddenly looked back. She opened her wings and jumped up. She grabbed the youngster and tried to return to the rock wall. However, in the snowstorm, she could not even fly alone, let alone carry another person. Like a kite with a broken string, she was whirling in the wind. Both of them were about to fall. Another figure jumped out of the rock wall and shouted, "Monkey fishing for the moon." This was not the name of a powerful move. It was the name of the game that all monkey children played when they were young. The story of the monkey fishing for the moon was told by Li Qingshan to each of them. 7 or 8 figures jumped into the wind and snow. The first person felt his legs tighten when he grabbed Li Fengxian. Finally, a long human ladder was formed, swaying in the wind and snow. Li Huchen roared and pulled out his sword to cut the wind. The bald prince and several other brothers tried their best to pull everyone back. They kept chanting Buddha's name, Amitabha, Amitabha. When the young man came back to his senses, he felt a few strong arms pressing him tightly against the rock wall. A wave of genuine qi entered his body, and many concerned faces appeared in front of him. For a moment, he couldn't tell whose arms they were. A warm feeling welled up in his chest, and tears rolled down his cheeks, which immediately froze into ice. Just now, when he jumped out of the cliff, if anyone hesitated for a moment, he would have fallen down. "Idiot, why are you crying? You don't know to call us when you can't hold on anymore?" Li Fengxian said, "Li Yunfei, just now, you are in front of the youngest. You don't know to take care of him." "Madam, I can't hold on anymore. How can I take care of him? Speaking of which, if I didn't react fast enough, you would be dead." Li Yunfei looked wronged. Just now, he jumped out and shouted "monkey fishing for the moon" in the air, gathering all his brothers. "Ha!" Clear laughter rang out from above. Everyone raised their heads and saw Li Qingshan standing on the rock face with his arms crossed. It was like nothing had happened the entire time. He even said complacently, "How's that? It's all thanks to me teaching you this move." Everyone stared at him angrily. Li Qingshan beckoned to them. "Come on, whoever reaches the top first, I will give him the title of Hero King." They looked at each other. In this snowstorm, each other's faces became clear, and a long-lost friendship surged in their hearts. Li Guanyin said, "Let me bring up the rear." Li Fengxian said, "I will go with you." What hero king? I don't care. As a result, they formed a new group. The strongest took turns to lead the way, digging holes in the cold, tough walls that they could climb through. They no longer pursued Li Qingshan at full speed. Instead, they climbed straight towards the top of the mountain. Li Qingshan smiled and shook his head. With a leap, he shot to the top of the mountain and disappeared into the snowstorm. As he disappeared, the snowstorm began to lessen. All the princes and princesses were certain that the violent and abnormal snowstorm just now was definitely his doing. Although they did not know how he controlled this vast power of heaven and earth, they were certain that it was so, and because of this, they had a bellyful of anger. Perhaps in the hearts of all children, their fathers were omnipotent. But most children would find that this was not the case when they grew up. But Li Qingshan still retained this feeling. No matter how easygoing he was still like a mysterious mountain that stood far away in the sky. One could only look at him from afar but not approach him. Chapter 12:45. I still need to focus on my cultivation. I don't have time to deal with all these things. The old man is obviously fooling us again. We can't let him succeed. They all stepped back and refused to go up. Among the chatter, someone said, "Just let the youngest do it." Everyone agreed. Let the old man be proud. We'll let the weakest and most useless one be the hero king. Li Yuanfei, you're the weakest and most useless one. Let go of me. I don't want to be the hero king. Thus, the young man was passed up hand by hand, and he was the only one who objected loudly. But his body was stiff. He couldn't resist. He was sent to the edge of the cliff. He was so anxious that his face turned red. At this time, a big hand reached in front of him. He looked up and saw Li Qingshan's smiling face. "Okay, I promise you. If you don't want to be the hero king, then so be it." Li Qingshan glanced down again. "Ah, old man? A bunch of fools." But according to human standards, he was indeed more than 100 years old. Everyone cursed in their hearts, "We've been fooled by the old man again." When they climbed up the cliff, even Li Fengxian couldn't care about his image anymore. He lay on the ground and panted. Li Qingshan stood on the side of the cliff with his hands behind his back. He looked through the broken gate tower. The ape deity villa had been eroded by wind and snow for decades. Even the broken walls were hard to recognize. This was the place where he started in this world. Now it would be the end. "My children, I'm leaving." The princes and princesses were shocked. They knew this day would come eventually. But when it really came, they still felt it was too sudden. Maybe they had an illusion that this man would always be like a mountain, standing in the distance until the end of time. They couldn't help but feel all kinds of feelings in their hearts. Li Guanyin sighed and stood up. He cupped his hands and said, "Father, you still have many things to settle. This world, what does this world have to do with me?" Li Qingshan blinked. For a moment, he looked even younger than the children. Maybe some prisoners would fall in love with the cage. But he wouldn't. He wouldn't be locked up for 100 years or 1,000 years. "Amitba, you are the hero king." Everyone felt that he had a responsibility to the world. Even though he had not done anything serious over the years, the title of Knight-Errant King was enough to subdue all the evildoers. It was even more effective than Gu Yenying's strict laws. "I am the hero king, or your king father. I have many other identities and titles, but I'm actually Li Qingshan. Now, Li Qingshan is going to do what Li Qingshan wants to do." Li Qingshan clapped his hands. What lord of the world? What great power of the world? They were all discarded like a pair of worn-out shoes. Lightly and quickly, he walked towards the gate of the villa. Gu Yenying was waiting for him there. "Amitba. Father, please stay a little longer. Your sudden departure will cause chaos in the world. You put Amitba first, then why are you begging me? The world is not the world of the hero king, nor is it the world of the world society, but the world of the people. If the people of the world think that the world should be in chaos, then let it be." In fact, Li Qingshan didn't think much of Gu Yenying's strict laws. Although it made the world peaceful, it was normal to not pick up lost items on the road and not to close doors at night, and it even almost achieved equality for everyone, Was it really reasonable for a prince to break the law and the common people to be punished the same? The strong could not bully the weak, the wise could not play with the fools, and the group gave in to the individual? Although everyone liked and hated good and evil could not explain everything, and there was never an absolute standard. A world of peace and prosperity like this was merely a great dream that they had created using methods that surpassed this world. It was a dream that belonged to Li Qingshan and Gu Yanning. Now, they were finally going to wake up from this dream. He never thought about keeping the world's society for thousands of years. There was nothing in the world that could not be destroyed. He also never thought about letting his children and grandchildren love each other and coexist peacefully. They loved each other like poisonous insects, so they could kill each other and walk their own path. And he had given everyone a chance. All kinds of martial arts manuals, cultivation methods, and unique skills were widely spread in this world, almost to the extent that they could be found everywhere, and no one could block them anymore. My children, change what you want the world to become with your own hands. If you want to do good, do good. If you want to do evil, do evil. I will look at you from the sky and laugh at your stupidity. Li Qingshan laughed and stepped into the gate of the villa, disappearing into the ruins. The children looked at each other and didn't know what to say for a moment. Suddenly, a dark blue cloud crossed the sky and fell beyond the horizon, from the northern territory to the middle territory, and even to the southern territory, covering the sky with a wonderful and even texture. The children looked up in surprise. Everyone in the world could see it if they looked up. An indescribable long cry resounded through the world. The dark blue cloud suddenly fell, giving people the feeling that the sky had collapsed, and those who were timid were already lying on the ground. A great wind rose. It wasn't as cold and fierce as a snowstorm, but rather hot. It was like the summer wind in June, melting all the ice and snow in the sky, whistling and surging between heaven and earth. The vast sea of trees revealed a verdant color, bending down like grass. Monstrous waves were stirred up in the eastern sea. The children also found it hard to breathe. The dark blue cloud was about to press down on their heads, but it suddenly rose up. In the blink of an eye, it shrank 100 times. Just now, they could see clearly that it was a giant bird. They couldn't help but widen their eyes, feeling extremely shocked. Their hearts felt like they had been broken through, and they could feel the boundless vastness of the world. Unknowingly, tears streamed down their cheeks. But there was no sadness or joy in their hearts. Every feeling became incomparably insignificant, and they didn't know why they were crying. A great wind rose and the rock soared. In the blink of an eye, the rock flew far away. The stars shone brightly, and the jade sky was clear. The children stood on the cliff for a long time. Just now, they came back to their senses and felt a little dispirited. Things that they had thought to be incomparably important suddenly didn't seem worth mentioning. "Father has left," Li Guanyin said. "Has he really left?" The youth asked in a daze. "Didn't he say that he would watch over us from all over the world?" Li Yuanfei patted his shoulder casually. "The youngest, you're really too young. How could you believe such words? It's more likely that he will forever live in our hearts." As soon as they finished speaking, the wind and clouds in the sky suddenly changed. Wisps of clouds appeared, forming a large smiling face under the moonlight. It looked like a child's scribble, but it vaguely resembled Li Qingshan's appearance. Li Yunfei stammered, "It can't be a coincidence, right? How annoying." Li Fengxian lowered his head, but he couldn't help but smile. The youth suddenly looked up and shouted, "Father, just watch carefully. We definitely won't let you down." Chapter 1246. An endless starry sky came toward them, and the stars drew billions of lines. Suddenly, the rock folded its wings and stopped steadily in the void. Li Qingshan lay on the back of the rock and couldn't help but look back. The small world had been left far behind, turning into a shining star that was tens of thousands of miles away. He looked into the depths of the void. It was dark and deep, and the stars were shining brightly. He immediately understood that every star in the void was a world, and every world had countless stories happening. "Qingshan, Can you still sense your doppelganger? Gu Yenying's voice sounded in Li Qingshan's mind, and it seemed to have become much larger. Although she had decided to fulfill her promise to send him back to the land of the 9 prefectures and accompany him in this gamble, she didn't want to risk everything. The key to whether Li Qingshan could deduce the way home was whether he could maintain a connection with his doppelganger and obtain the support of spiritual power. Otherwise, the spiritual power would constantly dissipate in the void, and the deduction itself would consume a lot of spiritual power. I'll say this one last time. It's not too late to turn back now. Luo Ho Xiaoming's voice sounded. He was not far from Li Qingshan. He had already grown to the age of 2 or 3 years old, and his body was full of fat. He had become a little chubby boy, and even though he had a serious expression, he couldn't be serious. Of course I can sense it, and it's very strong. Li Qingshan heard the conversation of the children on the cliff and even controlled the clouds to draw a self-portrait. The mirror doppelganger didn't let him down. In this way, he had the support of an entire world on his way home. Strangely, time flowed much faster in the small world than in the void. Everything seemed to be in fast-forward mode. In the blink of an eye, the clouds gathered and dispersed, the sun moved, and the moon rotated. The children were scattered all over the world, doing their own things. Originally, he wanted to find some time to let his doppelganger descend and give everyone a scare like a king. Now, it seemed that by the time he had time to do this, the 2 words, chivalrous king, would have become a distant legend. But this was also good. Let them go their own way. And I will also go my own way. That's good. Let's start the deduction. Gu Yenying gently flapped her wings again. He felt an unprecedented power surging within him. Although that wasn't her own power, and it would take years for her to recover once it was used up, it was believed that one day, she would transform into a real Kunpeng. At this very moment, the Kunpeng feather resonated with her heart. It had reached an unprecedented level. Since he was a bird, he had to fly. The Kunpeng had the form of a big fish. But just like how butterflies were transformed from caterpillars, every moment they swam in the deep sea and crawled on the ground was for the day they could spread their wings and soar. Only then can I be considered to have returned my true colors. Blindly hiding and enduring silently was not the true heart of the Kunpeng. To her, this journey was not only for a promise, but also for a greater experience. Li Qingshan nodded and tried to stretch his limbs. Without the restraint of the miniature world, the ox demon, tiger demon, spirit turtle, and phoenix all awakened, opening their eyes again. In that moment, all of his strength recovered, dyeing his dark golden eyes. They were no longer crimson either. Instead, they had become pitch black. He almost could not help but cry out, "I, Li Qingshan, have returned." However, as he powered the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression, his mind calmed down again, like the deep sea. He silently sensed his current state first. The ape demon transformation was only at the first layer, so it did not affect the balance of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine too much. However, it was no longer as smooth and free as before. However, this was a brand new power after all. Blindly pursuing balance was pointless. Only by constantly surging with new power could he reach unprecedented heights. At this moment, he suddenly felt a sense of worry, as with the complete recovery of the spirit turtle transformation, his connection with his mirror clone had become even stronger. He could control it even more freely now. This was not a problem in itself. It was just like how after training, a person would definitely feel like they could control their body more freely and nimbly. However, if there was stronger, would there also be weaker? If he really pulled the distance to 1,000,000 kilometers, 10 million kilometers, or even 10 million kilometers, would he really be able to maintain contact? He would not change his decision to return home because of this, but he did not hide this fact either. He passed it on to Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming. Gu Yenying said, "Little Ming, what do you think? If your clone originates from the spirit turtle clan in Ruin's End, then it really is extremely powerful. I've heard that some spirit turtles can allow their clones to wander through the 6 realms of Sasra. However, you have to understand that while the 6 realms of Sasra are not small, they can't compare to the entire space. All powers have their limits. There's no such thing as omnipotence. I can't be certain how much distance will affect your ability either. For now, all you can do is continue advancing and verify it with practice. It's best if you can deduce the approximate distance from the world of the 9 prefectures during this process, and then make a decision. Although Luo Ho Xiaoming did not agree with this voyage, just now, since he said it was the last time, then it really was the last time. Since Li Qingshan did not change his mind, he would not say any more nonsense. Instead, he would give his full support and use his experience to provide the best advice. As a former god, he was the one who understood this space the best among the 3. Although he was still very weak, in this situation, knowledge was more important than power. Just like how Li Qingshan would not eliminate Luo Ho Xiaoming just because he wanted to take revenge on him, they all had their own temperament and courage, which was why they were able to help each other in the same boat. Yes, I will do my best and try to deduce the pattern. When the Kunpeng flew over, it did not move in a straight line at a uniform speed. Instead, it was full of twists and turns. With the speed of the Kunpeng, the difference between speed and slowness could be unimaginable. Whether or not he could deduce the pattern, he was not sure. But even if I lose contact with my doppelganger, I will not turn back. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, it will be too late to turn back then. We have to find another world to settle down, accumulate strength, and wait for the next opportunity before we lose contact with our doppelganger. You have all crossed worlds, so you should know the risks. Gu Yenying, do you have this ability? If the distance is not too far, I am confident that I can take you there, but I can't screen the world. The first time they flew to a small world, it was because the Kunpeng feather was influenced by her will and chose the safest world. Even so, it still had to go through many difficulties to settle down. If it was not for Li Qingshan's divine talisman of great creation, it would have probably died in the small world. But now, the divine talisman of great creation was left in the small world, and it could no longer be used as a life-saving straw. The choice of the world became even more important. If they were not careful, their lives would be in danger. That's good. I will screen the world. I am very good at this. Luo Ho Xiaoming laughed at himself and touched the slingshot at his waist. All right, then I will have to trouble the 2 of you to support me. Li Qingshan said sincerely. With such companions, there was no need to worry about not being able to achieve great things. Don't talk nonsense. Leaving the small world is something I must do anyway. In this void, my position has been locked down with great difficulty. Luo Ho Xiaoming thought to himself. I am really lucky to have met these 2 fellows. Little Ming, then I will make another promise with you. If you can help me return to the 9 provinces, I will definitely help you beat up your mother. Li Qingshan's words were like a mountain. He did not care that there was another powerful god among his opponents. Anyway, he already had a 500-year promise with Qiongqi. There was no need to worry when there were too many debts, and no need to bite when there were too many gods. Luo Ho Xiaoming was stunned. He frowned and said, why do these words sound so strange? As long as the meaning is right. A mother who only wants to kill her own son. She is worse than a beast. I might as well kill her to my heart's content. Li Qingshan and Luo Ho Xiaoming had been together for dozens of years. He believed that he had some understanding of Luo Ho Xiaoming's temperament. Although he did not know how Luo Ho Xiaoming had created such great evil karma, to the point of summoning the rebound of karmic fire, he was definitely not an evil person. In other aspects, there was nothing to say. He was definitely a friend worth befriending. Luo Ho Xiaoming looked deeply at Li Qingshan. Friend? That was something that he had never had before. In the past, who had the qualifications to be his friend? Li Qingshan did not say anything else. He closed his eyes and concentrated on deducing the path. In order to deal with the risk of losing contact with his doppelgangers, he had to deduce the longest path here. When he first arrived, the spinning sea of stars once again reflected in his mind. Then, it gradually slowed down and corresponded with the stars in the sky. Although it was only a miniature world, the spiritual energy it possessed was definitely as vast as the ocean. It did not seem like he had to worry about it running out. However, in space, the spiritual energy dispersed far too quickly. Before long, it had to stop and wait for the spiritual energy to slowly recover. He could not help but feel rather envious of Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming. Gu Yenying had transformed into a Kunpeng, so she did not rely on her own power at all. Meanwhile, although Luo Ho Xiaoming had not even undergone a single heavenly tribulation, his power did not disperse. Instead, it could absorb power from space. He was currently focused on cultivating. Can I lock up my spiritual energy? However, even the spirit turtle can't do it, let alone the ox demon and tiger demon. But hold on. Li Qingshan thought of something. He pressed his hand against the top of his head and murmured, Ape Demon's Air Assimilation. This was the name of his #1 ability of the Ape Demon. Originally, the Ape Demon transformation was too weak, so it was greatly suppressed by the other 4 transformations. One could imagine a scene like this: oxen on the left, scarlet tiger on the right, spirit turtle on the bottom, and a phoenix on the top. Meanwhile, a pitiful ape was squeezed in the middle, scratching its ears and cheeks anxiously. Now that it had finally broken free, it extended its long arms and locked down the space. In a split second, Li Qingshan felt that he had been isolated from the vast space. As expected, his spiritual energy was no longer dispersed. Although he could not move at all in this situation, and maintaining the ability also required a certain amount of spiritual energy, it was still much better than his current situation just now. After all, he did not need to move his body to perform the derivation. He only needed to think, so the efficiency was much higher. Luo Ho Xiaoming could not help but open his eyes and glance at him. He really did have various powerful bloodlines. It was strange that he could actually fuse them into one body. If he really was that legendary ape that could lock down the space with this ability, it would not be difficult for him to roam the space when he fully matured. Chapter 1247. An azure trail was reflected in the Kunpeng's deep and sharp eyes. It spread its wings that spanned thousands of miles and flapped them with all its might. There was no wind in the void, but the edges of its wings created ripples that distorted the dark void. In an instant, it became an existence like a gale. It followed the azure trail and disappeared into the endless void. The river of stars spun and flew. In this endless void, even the Kunpeng was as insignificant as a ring. However, it was free and unfettered, like a fish returning to the ocean. If it was trapped in a small world, it would feel cramped even when it spread its wings. Even in the world of the 9 provinces, it would not be able to travel to its heart's content. Gu Yenying was completely immersed in the joy of flying. Yes, this was what she had been searching for all this time. Endless freedom. Only the azure trail was a kind of restraint. It often made her feel the urge to leave the track. She needed to exert all her mental strength to suppress this feeling. The trail continued to extend, but the process was very slow. It was far from being able to keep up with the Kunpeng's speed. Li Qingshan stood on the Kunpeng's back. He opened his eyes wide and focused his mind. Through the flowing river of stars, he continuously verified his deductions and made further progress. However, he could not use the ape demon absorption to prevent spiritual energy from dispersing. Thus, the efficiency of his deductions was naturally not high. Fortunately, up until now, there had been no problems with the path he had deduced. It corresponded to all the stars, which made him heave a sigh of relief. In the end, after some calculations, he decided to stop deducing. He only verified his deductions so that he could better accumulate spiritual energy and prepare for the next deduction. On the other hand, Luo Ho and Xiaoming were completely immersed in cultivation, spending every minute and every second. Every minute and every second seemed to be growing. Li Qingshan was a little envious of their freedom. He preferred the feeling of having one's feet on the ground. Perhaps it was because he was too used to the nourishment of the power of the earth. Once he left the earth, he would feel empty. Stop! Luo Ho Xiaoming's voice suddenly sounded in Li Qingshan's mind. The Kunpeng retracted its wings and stopped in the void. What is it? Li Qingshan asked. I want to go through the tribulation. As soon as Luo Ho Xiaoming finished speaking, a clap of thunder rang out in the void. A bolt of lightning tore through the darkness and shone into Li Qingshan's eyes. He sighed in his heart, This heavenly tribulation is really everywhere. What was supposed to be a terrifying calamity now seemed very familiar. However, he felt that it was a little strange. Luo Ho Xiaoming must have gone through many heavenly tribulations in the past. How could he do it again? Even if a phoenix was reborn from nirvana, the heavenly tribulation it had transcended from the egg would not come again. Luo Ho Xiaoming leaped up and faced the heavenly tribulation. Not long after, he returned to the rock's back. His body became thinner. Furthermore, he had grown a lot taller. He looked 5 or 6 years old again. The process of transcending the tribulation was nothing to write home about. It was as easy as eating and drinking. The tribulation lightning was in his hands. Just like a tamed puppy, it could only bite him gently a few times and leave some teeth marks. "Let's go." Li Qingshan asked the question in his heart. Luo Ho Xiaoming smiled and said, "If I couldn't even deceive the heavenly tribulation, I would have been burned to death by the karmic fire." Asuras were originally immortal and could be reborn continuously, let alone the divine son of Asura. As for the karmic fire, not to mention nirvana rebirth, even reincarnation would not be able to escape. "Qingshan, you are going to undergo the tribulation soon, right?" Gu Yenying suddenly asked. "Yes." Li Qingshan nodded with a serious look on his face. Every cultivator dreamed of going through the tribulation. Every time he underwent the tribulation, he would be reborn from the cocoon. Not only would his power increase, but his nature would also change. He could go from a mortal to a deity. However, he definitely could not undergo the fourth tribulation now, because it was beyond the limit of what the 9 prefectures could accommodate. The 9 prefectures was not a small world. It would not be as gentle as confining power and misfortune. He had seen with his own eyes the scene when Qiong Qi's incarnation descended. It was truly like being struck by lightning. Strong winds and earth fire came together, and it would not stop until the invader was destroyed. After balancing the 4 transformations of the ox, tiger, turtle, and phoenix, he was only 1 step away from the 4th tribulation. Now, he had activated the ape demon transformation. Fortunately, the ape demon transformation was only at the 1st level, so its power was very limited. It also broke the original balance and did not immediately attract the tribulations. However, with the degree of compatibility between him and the ape demon transformation, once he broke through the boundary of the small world, the following cultivation would not be too difficult. He had gained a lot from the training in the small world. First, he comprehended the power of the earth from the confinement of the world. Only the ox demon had this ability, so it naturally laid the foundation for breaking through the 6th level of the ox demon. He could even try to break through. Among all the transformations, the ox demon transformation was not only the foundation, but also the most suitable for his temperament. Even the ape demon transformation was inferior. After several decades of fighting against the heavens, the tiger demon's fighting spirit had awakened a long time ago, constantly being tempered and tested. However, the tiger demon transformation had always focused on explosive power. If he wanted to break through to the 6th layer of the tiger demon, he still needed a great battle as a fortuitous encounter. After becoming a god of the world, observing everything in the world and comprehending the laws of the world would benefit the spirit turtle transformation no less than the ox demon transformation. In fact, it would even last longer. Both transformations just happened to focus on accumulation. Breaking through to the 6th layer of the spirit turtle transformation was only a matter of time. Currently, devoting all his efforts to deriving the path of cultivation was also a form of cultivation. Even with the shortcoming of the phoenix transformation, he experienced a rebirth of lust after going through the process of entering the world and emerging from it. It could be said that all of the transformations were restless, wanting to push Li Qingshan to a higher realm of cultivation. If he could find a world comparable to or larger than the 9 provinces, he could immediately undergo the 4th heavenly tribulation and become a demon emperor. Don't worry, I'll suppress my strength. If it really doesn't work, I'll just undergo nirvanic rebirth again. As soon as he returned to the 9 provinces, he would undergo the tribulation immediately and ascend with little n. Even if he did not want to return to the 9 provinces, Space was definitely not a good place for undergoing the tribulation. Just the issue of spiritual energy dissipating would greatly affect the success rate of undergoing the tribulation. He was confident, but he was not arrogant enough to believe that undergoing the fourth heavenly tribulation would be as easy as Luo Ho Xiaoming undergoing the first heavenly tribulation. The Kuan Peng spread its wings and took off once more. Afterwards, it paused 2 more times so that Li Qingshan could calm down and deduce his next path. Although his connection with his mirror clone had indeed weakened, he could still control it with ease. It was as if he did not have to worry about losing contact at all. Everything went unexpectedly smoothly. Li Qingshan had already begun planning what he would do after reuniting with Little N. He had to help the Banyan Tree King become a god of the world first, and then he would go to the Dragon Province and kill the Crown Prince of Xiqing. Qiongji should be fine, and who knew how Ru Exin was doing? Just as he was thinking, he suddenly sensed the power of the earth that he had not felt in a very long time. However, as far as the eye could see, the closest planet was over 1 million kilometers away. Apart from worlds, was there land in the endless space as well? The Kuan Peng suddenly slowed down. The mountains blocked its path. Chapter 1248. Millions of mountains stretched across the void. They were of different shapes and sizes. The big ones spanned tens of thousands of miles and were comparable to small worlds. The small ones were only the size of a fist. There were so many that one couldn't even see the end of them. They all floated quietly, silently watching the tiny Li Qingshan on the back of the rock. Li Qingshan frowned. This wasn't the case when he came. Otherwise, with the huge body of the rock, he would have to go around. But the path he deduced was to go straight through. Are you sure there's no mistake in your deductions? Gu Yenying asked. Yes. Li Qingshan said. These millions of mountains seem to have appeared out of thin air. Look carefully. Is there a star missing? Luo Ho Xiaoming said. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and opened them again. There is one missing. Could this be? It's just a destroyed world. Luo Ho Xiaoming said softly. He looked at his hand and his face darkened. What destroyed the world? Li Qingshan felt a chill in his heart. He looked at the millions of mountains cautiously. It was as if there was a terrifying monster hiding behind one of the mountains. Don't worry. It's most likely a natural death. Luo Ho Xiaoming held his chin and observed. Natural death? Li Qingshan muttered to himself. He had experienced 2 worlds. Although they were different in size, they gave him the feeling that they had existed for a long time. He didn't think that he would see the death of a world with his own eyes. All things come and go. Even a world can't exist forever. It has its own birth and death. In this void, there are stars falling every moment. There's nothing to be surprised about. But that planet was very far from here in the first place. Li Qingshan frowned in confusion. That's why I'm sure it's a natural death. The death of a world isn't a sudden explosion. Instead, like everything else, it gradually collapses and disintegrates. It usually lasts for a long time. Once it can no longer be anchored in the void, its power will shoot out in a random direction. Who knows where it will go? I see. Li Qingshan sighed. Although this was a coincidence, in such a long journey and such a vast starry sky, it really couldn't be considered a coincidence. He stared at the incomparably huge corpse. He discovered that it was not stationary. Even the largest mountain was moving slowly, and no one knew where it would stop. The strong wind reverberated between the mountains, as if the world was breathing heavily. The magnetic field fluctuated between strong and weak, changing constantly. It was like a soul that refused to disperse. One of these 2 objects was originally high up in the sky. An underground place. At this moment, they blended together and became exceptionally chaotic. Countless meteorites flew in all directions. The smaller the meteorite, the bigger the meteor. On the contrary, the might of the attack was even greater. Even a grand cultivator would not be able to match up to it. After all, it was the power of heaven and earth. Even the remnant power was not to be underestimated. Looks like we can only take a detour. Gu Yenying asked, but Qingshan, once you deviate from the path, can you still find the right path? This detour will take us tens of millions of miles. This decaying world was clearly not a small world. The thick earth had completely collapsed and spread out, filling up the void for millions of miles. A simple detour would take tens of millions of miles. It's hard to say. Li Qingshan shook his head slightly. Along the way, he had been constantly locating the position of the stars. It was not because he had nothing better to do, but because he had to constantly correct the path according to the star chart. If he took a detour like this, all his previous efforts would be wasted. There were no obvious coordinates in the void, and the stars all looked the same. He might not be able to find the right path and be completely lost in the void. I can shrink my body and go through it, Gu Yenying said. Little Ming, what do you think? Li Qingshan asked. No matter what, we must use the fastest method to leave this area as soon as possible. Luo Ho Xiaoming's expression was solemn. Why? It's best that you don't know. Little Ming Luo smiled, causing people to shudder. Then let's go through it. Gu Yenying took a deep breath. The Kunpeng gradually shrank until its wingspan was only 3,000 meters. If it was placed in another world, it would still be a huge creature. However, in the vast void, it was even more minuscule. It spread its wings and flew towards the mountains. At that moment, she wielded the power of the Kunpeng. She fought against the omnipresent power of magnetism while gathering strong gales to deflect the meteorites flying towards her. However, the most dangerous thing was not the meteorites, but the large and small fragments of space. They were like broken glass and were almost completely transparent. Even the Kunpeng had to dodge carefully, and its speed was greatly affected. Luo Ho Xiaoming's expression became more and more solemn, but he did not say anything. He stared at the surrounding scenery in a daze. When he approached a mountain that stretched for thousands of miles, Li Qingshan closed his eyes and reached out his hand. However, he did not feel the power of the earth. Was it because it was too small and could not be considered the earth? However, the largest mountain here was only this size. It was not easy to find such a large mountain in the 9 states, and it clearly included the part that originally belonged to the underground. He could clearly feel the power of the earth, and it was getting stronger and stronger. It was like a call. He could not help but be curious. What was waiting for him in front? Look over there. Gu Yenying's words broke the silence. Li Qingshan and Luo Ho Xiaoming followed her line of sight and saw a huge building that was chiseled into the mountain. Although the style was different from the 9 states, and it was badly damaged, they could still see the majestic atmosphere. This is definitely not something that mortals could build. It must have been a large sect. Li Qingshan sighed. The pavilions of mortals could not have been preserved at all. Even cultivators ended up like this, let alone mortals. I can still see the layout of the protective formation. It seems to have been swallowed by the magma. There's someone there. Oh, it's a stone statue. Gu Yenying vaguely saw a figure at the top of the mountain. She flew closer and realized that it was a stone statue. It was in the shape of a woman with eyebrows and hair. It was very lifelike. It's not a stone statue. It turned itself into stone in an attempt to escape. What a fool. If it had killed itself earlier, it would have had a chance to enter the cycle of reincarnation. Luo Ho Xiaoming looked disdainful. When the world declined to a certain extent, the connection with the 6 paths of reincarnation would be severed. However, normal people would not know about this. Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying then noticed the despair on the woman's face. She clearly understood that this was just a struggle before death. The void would not only swallow spiritual qi, it would also swallow souls. What was the use of turning the body into a stone statue? Gu Yenying said, maybe she is also waiting for someone. Li Qingshan stared at the woman's face and was speechless. Gu Yenying said, I'm sorry. It's fine. But the 9 states is not so easily destroyed. I think the scale of this world is no smaller than the 9 states. Do you think there will be any treasures left behind? Li Qingshan felt the calling of the power of the earth becoming stronger. When the world is destroyed, the spiritual qi will disperse. Everything attached to it will also die. Luo Ho Xiaoming thought of that scene again. On the blood-red land, A child, under the guidance of his mother, shot the stars with a slingshot. Floating astronomy. Chapter 1249. Luo Ho Xiaoming's face was pale as he pressed his chest. He had already sacrificed all his strength to resolve the karmic backlash, but this memory could not be erased. Even though it was a small world, there were trillions of living beings in it. The destruction of the world and the death of all living beings without any reason or value, all because of his unwarranted malice. Even the 12 demon gods of the demon domain would not do such a thing. They would only expand the demon domain, spread their ideology, and invert good and evil. This kind of evil, even the demon gods could not compare. It was so huge that it did not feel real. It was just like the fall of a star. But the Asura path was not the demon domain. It was one of the 3 great paths of good in the 6 paths of reincarnation, and Asura was not an evil god. The world in front of him seemed to be destroyed by him, the millions of mountains pressed on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. "Little Ming, what's wrong?" Li Qingshan asked in surprise. Luo Ho Xiaoming waved his hand weakly. Li Qingshan arrived before him in a single step and threw a punch. Boom! A flying meteorite shattered, almost smashing Luo Ho Xiaoming into meat paste. With his current condition, even if he did not die, he would be heavily injured. Li Qingshan was also shocked. He took half a step back. He felt his blood boil. The power of these meteorites was too strong. He lowered his head and asked, "Are you okay?" Luo Ho Xiaoming thanked him with difficulty. At this time, Kunpeng had already left the mountain. It went deeper into the mountains. There were floating mountains all around. The astral wind and the magnetic force became more chaotic and violent. Kunpeng also had to constantly change its posture, flapping its wings, controlling the astral wind and resisting the magnetic force. He controlled the atmospheric winds to fend off the magnetic field. He no longer had the time to pay attention to Li Qingshan, Rahu, and Little Ming on his back. Li Qingshan lifted Luo Ho Xiaoming up, opened the wings of wind. While absorbing the astral wind, he dodged back and forth on Kunpeng's back. When he could not dodge, he used the force field of the earth to change the direction of the meteorites. The only thing worth rejoicing was that the power of the earth was getting stronger and stronger. It provided him with an endless supply of life force. Seeing Luo Ho Xiaoming's dispirited face, Yang Kai said, as if he had returned to the state before his rebirth, he asked intentionally, "If you can survive in the void, why don't you just stay here and cultivate in a remote corner for a few thousand years? My strength should have recovered by then." We belong to the world. It didn't belong to the void. Mortals can survive on grass roots and tree bark. Spiritual energy was an indispensable resource, so he had to choose a suitable world. This is more important than anything else. The higher the level of a life form, the closer the power it grasped was to the origin. However, the closer the power was to the origin, the harder it was to absorb and transform it. For cultivators, spiritual power was equivalent to food for mortals. Even if some talented beings could break away from the need for food and absorb sunlight like plants, it was still not as convenient and fast as directly absorbing spiritual power. I see. If you return to the Asura realm, your strength should recover much faster. Li Qingshan said. The Asura realm was much larger than the 9 provinces, and the will of the world was even more powerful. As the beloved son of the Asura realm, he could receive unimaginable benefits. It was completely a blessing from the heavens. If I return before I make a full recovery, I'll be courting death. Though, if I can get a few more Asura fields, it'll be extremely useful. Luo Ho Xiaoming hesitated before making a rare request. Once I return to the 9 provinces, I'll help you get a few. Li Qingshan generously accepted the request at the expense of others. He was going to the Dragon Province to kill Crown Prince Si Qing anyway. When the time came, he could teach the old and young a lesson along the way. Getting a few Asura fields back would be a piece of cake. Luo Ho Xiaoming thought about it. But it's not like there's no treasure here. Since atmospheric winds and magnetic fields still exist, there might be heavenly wind marrow and earth fiendish magnetic poles. They can be used to forge innate arcane treasures. These world fragments are extremely valuable as well, but it's a pity that we can't collect them right now. Innate arcane treasures. Li Qingshan was greatly interested. Heavenly wind marrow. Does it really exist? I'd always thought it was a legend, and I even went out of my way to search for it. Gu Yenying was extremely interested as well. Her jade folding fan from the past was already unusable, and she just happened to be lacking a new fan. These two items exist with the world, like the bloodline beneath the skin. They'll only appear when the world collapses and the outside world collapses. Obviously, they won't be found normally. But once the bloodline is extracted, the world will decline even faster. Then aren't we in a treasure trove? This world is already dead anyway, so we can search for the corpses. Li Qingshan's eyes shone brightly. He felt like while the space was dangerous, it did not necessarily lack fortuitous encounters. But I'd advise you not to deviate too much from the path, and you shouldn't stay here for too long either. This isn't a safe place. Luo Ho Xiaoming did not say anything in the beginning because he did not want them to stay for too long. He muttered to himself, perhaps there's something like that in such a large world. Something like that? There's no need to think about it. There are still traces of heavenly wind marrow and earth fiend magnetic pole, and there are many of them. Those things don't have any aura at all, and even if there's only a tiny bit of them, we can only have a chance to discover them by shattering these mountains, or there might not be any at all. But if we can find one, it'll be worth it. It's a pity that we're too weak now. When Luo Ho Xiaoming talked about the heavenly wind marrow and earth fiend magnetic pole, he still appeared abnormally calm. He had shattered countless worlds, so he naturally would not be too interested in these common goods. But when he mentioned those things, he still revealed a hint of interest. Li Qingshan said anxiously, "You said it was so lively, but what exactly is it?" Gu Yenying suddenly reminded him, "Be careful in front." A large number of meteorites whizzed over, big and small, numbering in the tens of thousands. If the larger ones landed in the 9 provinces, they could directly flatten the Great Buddha Mountain. Killing a few grand cultivators in small chunks would be as easy as pie. The area they covered was so large that even the Kunpeng could not dodge. It could only gather astral winds and prepare to face them head-on. Li Qingshan's expression was solemn. He crossed his arms in a circle, fully activating the earthly force field. Invisible gravity pulled and pulled, sending some meteorites flying far away, and some smashing into each other. Not only did it protect him and Xiaoming, it also protected the Kunpeng beneath them. Luo Ho Xiaoming sighed, "If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I really wouldn't believe that this is something a demon king can do." Li Qingshan looked at his own hands. Although the ox demon divine art had always been smooth, this time, he had really exceeded his usual level. It was most likely due to the influence of that earthly force. He suspected that it was what Luo Ho Xiaoming was talking about, so he spoke of the power he had sensed. "You can actually sense the life soil of the 9 heavens?" Luo Ho Xiaoming was astonished. Just how many divine arts and techniques did he have? The earthly force was a type of source energy. Life soil of the 9 heavens, what is that? After such a long time, Li Qingshan finally heard the 2 words 9 heavens again. Floating astronomy. Chapter 1250. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "It's a type of soil. It doesn't have any spirituality, and it doesn't glow either. In fact, it looks no different from ordinary soil. However, it can grow endlessly, so it's called living soil." "What about the 9 heavens?" Li Qingshan asked. Even in this empty and desolate void, it made his heart burn with passion. "Don't you want to go above the 9 heavens?" That was the first world among the 10,000 worlds. Legend had it that the 3,000 worlds were separated from that place. Therefore, the living soil is also known as the origin of the earth, hence it is collectively known as the 9 heaven living soil. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "Where do you feel the direction is? If we haven't deviated too far from our course, we'll head over now. Didn't you say you wanted to leave this area as soon as possible? If I can get one, the risk will be worth it." "All right, it's not far ahead. It's less than 100,000 kilometers away from the route." Li Qingshan closed his eyes and deduced. Within this range, There was basically no need to worry about getting lost. Luo Ho Xiaoming said sincerely, "You're really a lucky guy. But in this way, there's no need to deliberately collect the astral wind pith and earth fiend magnetism. It's best if we can encounter them on the way, but if we don't, then forget it." Had this is strength. Li Qingshan calculated the route again, drawing a long arc in the void, which was reflected in Kunpeng's eyes. Kunpeng gently flapped its wings, gliding away. Mystic light illuminates all. Li Qingshan waved his hand, and pieces of the spirit turtle's profound shell dispersed, illuminating several hundred images in the surroundings. They were not as sharp as the Kunpeng's eyes. However, the advantage was that it wouldn't be obstructed by vision, so it would be easier for him to search for what he wanted. Sure enough, not long after, a strange gust of wind could be seen. It did not dance about wildly like the usual gust of wind. Instead, it maintained a certain shape, like a slender snake, with a faint silver luster. If one were to observe it carefully, they would discover that it was the source of the howling gust of wind in the surroundings. Celestial wind marrow. But how do I get it? Gu Yenying asked. Ordinary astral winds were hard to control, let alone this astral wind marrow. I wonder if the Sumeru ring can hold it. Do I have to swallow it directly? Luo Ho Xiaoming snapped, "Then our journey ends here. Your Sumeru rings are too low level. It was impossible for it to contain the astral wind essence. If you can trust me, I will. You can use my Chenkuan bag." As he spoke, he patted the cloth pouch on his waist. The cloth pouch looked very ordinary, with a red circle as a seal. It looked like a child's money bag. Li Qingshan remembered that he had taken the bullets from it. There must be a lot of good stuff inside. Li Qingshan rubbed his hands, looking like he was ready to kill and rob. Luo Ho Xiaoming couldn't be bothered with him. "Qingshan, stop messing around. Quickly draw the heavenly dipper wind marrow over." While urging, Gu Yenying ordered the Kunpeng to temporarily hide in a hollow of a mountain to avoid the shooting meteorites. Apparently, she was really tempted. All right. Li Qingshan stretched out his hands in the direction of the astral wind marrow. The earthly force field once again displayed its miraculous effect. The astral wind marrow couldn't escape the formless gravitational force. It flowed like a fish on a hook and was pulled over. Even the astral wind marrow was affected. The Kunpeng was only a phantom, after all. There was a limit to the amount of astral wind it could control. Now that they had the shield, they didn't have to worry anymore. Originally, getting close to the center of the violent astral winds was already a difficult thing. After all, the rock was only a shadow, and there was a limit to the astral winds it could control. Now, with such a shield, there was nothing to worry about. Luo Ho Xiaoming opened the Chenkuan bag. Li Qingshan waved his hands forcefully, and the astral wind marrow flowed into the bag. He let out a sigh of relief. This is indeed good stuff. I wonder what the earth fiend magnetic force looks like? Luo Ho Xiaoming opened his heaven and earth pouch, and Li Qingshan waved his hands forcefully, and the essence of wind of heavenly strength flowed into it. He let out a sigh of relief. It really is good stuff. I wonder what the earth fiend magnetic field looks like? However, in the following journey, they didn't even see the astral wind marrow, much less the earth fiend magnetic force. This filled him with regret. According to Luo Ho Xiaoming, as the world was destroyed, the astral wind marrow and the earth fiend magnetic force would disappear as well. There were many world fragments floating around, and they wouldn't be melted by the void. However, it was also because of this that even the Chenkuan bag couldn't store them. Perhaps only another world could devour and digest them. Li Qingshan asked curiously, "You said that every moment in the void is a world being destroyed. In that case, there should be world fragments everywhere. However, we've been flying all the way here, but why haven't we seen a single piece? Also, although the world's collapse would cause the spiritual qi to dissipate, such a large amount of earth and rocks wouldn't disappear for no reason. We haven't seen any meteors either. Things that the void can't digest will naturally be digested by other things." Void-devouring beasts? Gu Yenying asked. "You've even heard of the void-devouring beasts. With your cultivation, you're really knowledgeable." Gu Yenying smiled and said, I've even seen an eyeball of a void-devouring beast. A corpse king from the hungry ghost realm once used it to invade the 9 states. It sealed a large region and was almost devoured by the hungry ghost realm. Luo Ho Xiaoming said with certainty, that must have been obtained by chance. Even the weakest void-devouring beast isn't something a mere corpse king can deal with. Li Qingshan also recalled the devastation of that battle. That was the first time he came into contact with the 6 paths of reincarnation. He smiled and said, if we can kill 2 more void-devouring beasts and play with a few eyeballs, that would be even better. Let's hope your jinx doesn't come true. The void-devouring beasts are the scavengers of the void. They can devour anything, and world fragments are their favorite food. It won't be long before more void-devouring beasts are attracted here. Let's quickly take the living soil of the 9 heavens and leave. The Kuan Peng flew for another hundreds of thousands of miles and stopped, staring at a small mountain 10,000 miles away. Even though Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming didn't have the ability to sense the power of the earth like Li Qingshan did, they could still confirm that the living soil of the 9 heavens was right there. A small mountain wasn't anything special, but within a 10,000 miles radius, there were no other mountains, not even a single meteor. Strands of heavenly astral wind marrow coiled around the mountain, turning the void into an ocean of astral winds. Be it the mountains or the meteors, they were all crushed into dust. In the ocean of astral winds, there were specks of light flashing and moving without any pattern. They weren't affected by the astral winds at all, yet they never left the small mountain. From such a long distance, Li Qingshan could already feel the monster aura dispersing. That was the most direct effect of the magnetism. These specks of light must be the earth malevolent magnetism that Luo Ho Xiaoming mentioned. Chapter 1251. Great Harvest. Li Qingshan whistled, but he immediately found it troublesome, as there were no mountains nearby that he could hide in. Even if he went a little further away, the gravitational effect would just be slightly weaker at worst. However, the Earth's fiend magnetic field was extraordinarily difficult to deal with. Even from such a great distance, it could disperse demon chi slightly. If he drew closer, wouldn't the effects be even greater? Sigh, looks like I can only take it slow. Even if it was for the living soil of the 9 heavens, he could not give up now. He was just about to let Gu Yenying fly to the nearest mountain. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, how long are you going to do this? Do you really want to wait for the void-devouring beasts to swallow us all? Then what do you think we should do? We can't just give up like this, can we? Li Qingshan could clearly sense that the living soil of the 9 heavens calling out to him might just be an illusion. However, there was one thing he was certain of. This living soil of the 9 heavens would be of great benefit to the ox demon transformation. He was truly unwilling to give up just like this. Luo Ho Xiaoming handed the cosmos sack to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan took the cosmos sack and said in shock, for me? Scram. I'll lend it to you. How petty. Li Qingshan injected demonic chi and could immediately control the cosmos sack. Clearly, it was Luo Ho Xiaoming who had made things easier for him. Although he did not say anything, he was rather moved. Only with such trust could he live up to the word, we're in the same boat. Let me teach you how to use it. Luo Ho Xiaoming said slowly. Li Qingshan nodded as he listened. This cosmos sack was a divine weapon. It was definitely not as simple as an upgraded Sumeru ring. It was like a small world of its own. He tossed the cosmos sack high up, and it rapidly expanded in the air. In the blink of an eye, it was hundreds of li wide. And this was with Li Qingshan's power being limited. Otherwise, it could be even bigger. There was no way to know where its limits were. Open. With a shout, Li Qingshan opened his Qiankuan pouch wide like a man with a big belly opening his mouth. He took a deep breath, and the astral winds that filled the sky rushed over with a whistling sound. Wisps of heavenly astral wind marrow entered his pocket. However, the earth-fiendish magnetic fields were not affected at all. They continued to move about randomly in the void space. Their nature was completely different from the heavenly astral wind marrow. They looked like solid objects, but they weren't affected by the astral winds at all. They flickered with light like ball-shaped lightning bolts. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "Use your gravity." "I know." Li Qingshan opened his arms. Activating the earthly force field, he locked onto the earth fiendish magnetism field one by one. However, things did not go as smoothly as he had imagined. Although the earth fiendish magnetic forces were attracted, they were clearly more unwilling to leave that small mountain. Just like that, they fell into a stalemate. It was unknown how long it would take to pull them over. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and sensed the existence of the small mountain. In the cold and empty void, there was a kind of motherly warmth. He said quietly, "Please lend me your power." The strong gravity released by the small mountain suddenly weakened, while Li Qingshan's earth force field kept growing stronger. Instantly, those earth fiendish magnetic fields shot over like arrows leaving the bowstrings. They all fell into the Qingkuan pouch. The red string tightened, and the pouch's mouth was sealed. It gradually shrank and fell into Li Qingshan's hands again. The pouch bulged like it was filled with wind, and Li Qingshan handed it over to Luo Ho Xiaoming. It seemed to be just an ordinary money pouch with a few ingots of silver in it. Luo Ho Xiaoming reached out his hand and took it. He then hung it around his waist, looking as calm as ever. The void was cleared up, but a great number of broken pieces of worlds were still floating in the air. They were much denser than any other places they had been through so far. Unless Kuan Peng shrunk his body even more, he still wouldn't be able to approach the small mountain. Li Qingshan gave it a try. Although the earth force field could also affect the broken pieces of worlds, it couldn't even store them in the Qingkuan pouch, because the nature of the broken pieces of worlds was definitely not weaker than the Qingkuan pouch, and might even be more powerful. However, there was no need to feel pity. Just collecting so many heavenly wind marrow and earth fiendish magnetic fields was already a great harvest for this journey. But the best was always at the end. 9 heaven living soil, here I come. Li Qingshan spread his phoenix wings and said to Luo Ho Xiaoming, "Lend me some wind." Luo Ho Xiaoming opened a small opening in the Qingkuan pouch, and a gust of strong wind blew out. Li Qingshan's wings of wind stretched out for thousands of meters, and he flew up with the wind. There was no resistance in the void, and his speed was extremely fast. He activated the earth force field, and his speed instantly increased by a few times. At the same time, he kept changing his body shape, dodging the broken pieces of worlds. It was his first time flying so fast with his own power, and he could somewhat understand Gu Yenying's pursuit. However, what he yearned for was not the sky, and he hated the silence of the void even more. Feeling the call of the earth, he was like a child throwing himself into his mother's embrace, flying toward a small mountain. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "He won't crash into the mountain and die, right?" Gu Yenying said, "I don't think so." From their point of view, Li Qingshan was practically crashing into a small mountain. It was only when he was within 100 miles that he suddenly spread his wings and changed his stance, but his speed was still extremely fast. In the instant he was about to crash into the mountain, he threw out a punch with all his might. The small mountain collapsed soundlessly, and Li Qingshan went deep into the belly of the mountain through the cracks. When he reached the center, he finally saw the legendary 9 heaven living soil. Sure enough, it was as Luo Ho Xiaoming had said. There was nothing special about it at all. It seemed like an extremely ordinary piece of yellow-brown soil. It did not give off any spiritual qi at all, let alone glow. Moreover, it was only the size of a fist. However, in Li Qingshan's heart, the tiny piece of soil was even vaster and heavier than the millions of mountains. Only when countless rocks were piled together could they be called a mountain. Only when endless soil was deposited together could they be called the earth. However, on the tiny piece of soil, every single bump was like a mountain, and every single depression was like an abyss. It seemed to be the origin and symbol of the word earth. No matter when, where, how big or small it would not affect its essence at all. Li Qingshan slowly extended his hands, approaching the living soil of the 9 heaven. Brother Ox's figure suddenly appeared in his head, and the scenery before him changed. From when he first practiced the fist technique in Crouching Ox Village to the various cultivation experiences afterwards, the first layer, the second layer, All the way to the 5th layer of the Ox Demon, he went through every single ability of the Ox Demon transformation in a single moment. He actually felt like he had mastered them all. He could not help but say sternly, "The Ox Demon's great strength sinks in the mud." The 6th layer of the Ox Demon transformation no longer posed any obstruction to him. As a matter of fact, he could break through right now and obtain the unprecedented strength of the Ox Demon. He sucked in a deep breath and held back his excitement. He never thought just seeing the living soil of the 9 heaven would bring him so much benefit. It was like the spirit turtle obtaining the power of Ruin's End. The power of Ruin's End was vast and boundless, so how could it be mentioned in the same breath as the living soil of the 9 heaven? A world no smaller than the 9 provinces only possessed a tiny piece of the living soil of the 9 heaven, and it might not even exist. Just how precious and rare was it? Chapter 1252. Li Qingshan couldn't help but clench the living soil of the 9 heavens tightly. His entire body was trembling slightly. That power didn't fill up his body and make him feel like exploding. Instead, it was boundless and thick, wrapping him gently within it. The living soil of the 9 heavens didn't need to be refined, nor could it be refined. If he wanted to use it, the power would be used by him. If he didn't want to use it, the power would still be here. The spiritual power contained in any spiritual stone would be exhausted, but its power was endless. Gu Yenying stared at the small mountain. Even though the Kuanping had extremely strong eyesight, it was still as small as a grain of sand from thousands of miles away. She worriedly said, "Little Ming, why isn't he out yet? Could it be that something happened to him?" Luo Ho Xiaoming said meaningfully, "You care about him a lot." Yeah. Gu Yenying smiled, not trying to hide it. "Be careful not to damage your Taoist heart because of your personal feelings. Thank you for the reminder. I've been careful to control myself. However, if my Taoist heart is strong, even if it's just a small personal feelings, I'm still lacking. I hope I can be like him in the future." Gu Yenying smiled. "That's true. I really wonder who taught that guy." Luo Ho Xiaoming thought about Li Qingshan. That guy was simply full of personal feelings. He never saw any feelings as an obstacle. Sometimes, he was even so optimistic that he was almost naive. Yet, he was still able to advance bravely. He wasn't very smart, but he was able to see through everything. Luo Ho Xiaoming couldn't help but admire him. However, there was one exception. Their current journey was simply too personal, and they couldn't let go of things. He didn't know what kind of charm that little one had. He was able to make a person like him unable to forget him. "I think it must be someone from above the 9 heavens." Gu Yenying felt that her horizons had broadened a lot during her decades of association with Li Qingshan and Luo Ho Xiaoming. She was no longer limited to the small 9 states. Her identity as the daughter of the Eagle God was not even worth mentioning. Luo Ho Xiaoming joked, "It just so happens that if he dies, we won't have to go to the 9 states." "No, I still have to go back to the 9 states." Gu Yenying was determined, whether it was for the promise or for her personal feelings. The destination of this trip would not change. At least let him rest in peace. "All right then, let's wish fellow Taoist Li a long life." Luo Ho Xiaoming shrugged his shoulders, but this was also within his expectations. If he didn't have this bit of persistence, how could he be qualified to be in the same team as him? He came out. He seems to be very happy. Li Qingshan's figure leaped out of the crevice of the small mountain and stood there, roaring in his heart, "You 2 bastards! Are you done yet? You're the ones who are dead, you're the ones who can rest in peace, you're the ones who can live to 100 years old." Although they were separated by a great distance, their thoughts were connected, and they could even sense the strong emotions in their hearts. Otherwise, how could Gu Yenying see whether Li Qingshan's expression was happy or unhappy from such a distance? Gu Yenying said, How is the 9 heaven life soil? Is it as amazing as the legends say?" Although the life soil of the 9 heaven has many wondrous uses, it's not that easy to use. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "The closer a power was to the origin, the harder it was to use it. This was common sense in the world. You guys better watch carefully. Li Qingshan spread his legs, his left hand at his waist, and his right hand tightly grasped the life soil of the nine heaven. He raised it up high with all his might, shouting in his heart, "Please bestow me power, I am Qingshan." A formless and powerful force instantly spread out in the void. The mountains trembled, not to mention the small meteorites. Even the fragments of the world started to move, gathering toward his palm. Originally, although the fragments of the world were also being pulled by gravity, the effect was many times weaker. In an instant, his palm seemed to become the center of the void universe. Even the Kunpeng had to flap its wings to resist this gravitational force. This, not only was Gu Yenying speechless, even Luo Ho Xiaoming was dumbfounded. How is this still a monster king? Could it be that the greatest use of the life soil of the nine heaven was to bestow power? It wasn't used to build a paradise or something. No, that was impossible. The origin of the world had no will at all, and it was even more impossible for it to bestow its power. This must be it. He's just shouting casually, "Don't take it seriously," Gu Yenying said. Lil Ming's emotions were far too intense, such that even she could hear it. She had known Li Qingshan for many years, so she clearly understood his style. Fine. Luo Ho Xiaoming couldn't help but smile bitterly. Perhaps he was the only one who could use the power of the life soil of the nine heaven in such a simple and violent manner. Perhaps the life soil of the nine heaven had been prepared for him. His power had increased by more than 10 times. He had never heard of a cultivator with 3 heavenly tribulations who could have such power. Even he, the godchild of Luoho, didn't have such a method in the past. But what is he trying to do? The endless gravitational force pulled everything in the void, whether it was the stellar wind marrow, the earth fiendish magnetic force, the millions of mountains, or the fragments of the world. Why don't you just ask him? "Hey, Qingshan, we've already witnessed your power. We can continue our journey now." Gu Yenying called out in her mind. She hid behind a large mountain to resist the violent meteor shower. This is just the beginning. Li Qingshan wasn't just trying to show off his power. When the first meteor flew in front of him, he said in a deep voice, "Flowers in the mirror, moon in the water, real and illusory at the same time." Under his feet, the mirror-like water surface instantly expanded for 1,000 miles. The meteor fell into it, creating a ripple before disappearing. At the same time, in the small world, a meteor streaked across the sky. The friction with the air caused sparks to ignite, causing everyone to raise their heads and look up. In the mysterious void temple, Li Guanyin stood up and went to the courtyard. He frowned and fell into deep thought. Was it a normal meteor or a fiend star? Not only could flowers in the mirror create clones, but it could also transfer items between the main body and the clones. However, as the clones became more and more useless, this ability became useless. It wasn't until the clone became a god that it was finally reactivated and used to transfer spiritual power. Everyone in the small world who was looking up at the night sky was stunned. Because before the first meteor landed, hundreds, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of meteors flew over at the same time, drowning out the original river of stars and filling the entire night sky. This magnificent and glorious scene was like a dream. It was as if they had returned to 10 years ago, when the Kunpeng spread its wings and soared high. Above Hua City, Li Fengxian watched in a daze and muttered to himself, "Royal Father, is that you?" On the top of a big tree, Li Yunfei scratched his head. What the hell is the old man doing now? Other than him, who else could make such a big scene? On the great snow mountain of the northern region, Xuebing was dressed in white. Her hands were empty and she didn't hold a sword. She was surrounded by a stream of water as she fought against the tribulation lightning. She was continuously defeated and recovered, displaying the way of water softness to the fullest. Sometimes she would freeze into ice. As the hall master of the Snow Mountain Hall, she had to be responsible for many things. Unlike Yang Miaozhen, she didn't pursue Dao wholeheartedly, so her cultivation speed was much slower. However, after so many years of accumulation, she had finally reached this step. She had completely mastered the Gui water condensing qi method and added her own changes to it. This time, She had a 60% chance of passing the heavenly tribulation and ascending. At most, there was only a 60% chance. In the eyes of mortals, she was already old. Although she had a technique to preserve her youth, there was already a lot of white hair on her head. If she waited any longer, she wouldn't even have a 60% chance of success. She couldn't help but envy Hu Xian. Although her cultivation speed wasn't fast and she hadn't ascended yet, her long lifespan wasn't something Hu Xian could compare with. The changes in the heaven and earth also caused her to be slightly distracted. She felt that the heavenly tribulation had suddenly changed, but she didn't have time to think too much about it. She focused on passing the heavenly tribulation. Gu Yenying said in surprise, "He wants to become a void-swallowing beast." Luo Ho Xiaoming frowned and said, "Everything else is fine, but the world fragment isn't that easy to deal with. Do you know how many magical powers he has? Don't a demon king only have 4 magical powers?" Gu Yenying spread out her hands and said, "If you, a god's son, don't know, how would I know?" At this time, the first world fragment was finally brought to Li Qingshan. His expression also became solemn. He wasn't going to put on a fireworks show in the small world. The crux of the matter was this world fragment. Could it pass through the obstruction of the distant space and transport the world fragment back to the small world? When the world fragment landed in the water mirror's image, it immediately caused an unprecedented ripple. It did not sink into the water mirror's image immediately like a meteor. Instead, it became stuck there, presenting a strange sight. Half of it was in space, while the other half was in the small world. So it really doesn't work? But it shouldn't be impossible. It's just that my spirit turtle transformation is still too weak. Chapter 1253. But at this moment, a tremendous suction appeared in the miniature world, swallowing the fragment in a single gulp. Even Li Qingshan, who had already become a god of the world, failed to sense it. This was an instinctive desire from the world, just like how no matter how intelligent a person was, it was very difficult for them to control themselves. Their bodies could not lie. Li Qingshan had only become a god of the world recently, and he had used a trick to infiltrate the world's will. Although the miniature world was Li Qingshan's body, he was like a vegetable. Although he was the only clear consciousness, he could not even control the movement of his pinky finger. Otherwise, it would not be as simple as making the snowstorm grow or writing in the sky with clouds. It could move mountains and fill oceans. The fragment of the world completely fell into the miniature world and was immediately devoured and digested. The laws of the world immediately changed slightly, affecting the entire world. Afterwards, it developed an even more intense desire. It was even more obvious than when it devoured the Mist Province Cauldron. The Mist Province Cauldron was merely condensed from the laws of the world, while the fragment of the world was the laws of the world themselves, and it was several grades higher than the miniature world. It was basically the best nourishment. As a result, under the miniature world's cooperation, when the second fragment fell into the water mirror's image, it was basically absorbed without any delay at all, becoming a delicacy for the miniature world. Li Qingshan had been planning all along. If he could send these fragments of the world into his miniature world, it would assist the miniature world in its growth. Perhaps it would provide him with even more spiritual qi, and in the long run, the value of a world could never be underestimated. As the fragments fell into the miniature world, Li Qingshan felt his will rapidly expand. In the past, he had to move through various places to observe everything in the world, but now, his vision became wider and deeper. It was like a vegetable could finally move a finger, and the entire world was responding to him. In the past, he was just a thief who had snuck in, but now he had reached a higher level, gradually becoming a true lord of the world. He only needed a single thought, and spiritual energy would surge over. And the connection between his main body and his clone that had gradually weakened cleared up again. It was no longer just his main body trying to sense it. Instead, it was in the endless space. A star shone brightly for him, starting from the smallest meteor, moving on to boulders and hills. The meteor shower in the miniature world had already become burning stars, reflecting off one another in the dark sky. It looked even more magnificent and glorious. The mountains that stretched for thousands of miles were also a problem. Li Qingshan held the 9-heaven-living soil tightly. With a slight tug from the earth force field, the mountain was torn apart. He asked in his heart, Little Ming, do I look like a god to you? Like Maias. You can only do whatever you want in the void. Luo Ho Xiaoming said snappily, but he had to admit that it was too shocking. In the 6 paths of reincarnation, there were plenty of people who possessed such power. Even when he was at his peak, he was much stronger than this. However, the potential he displayed was simply shocking. He was using the omnipresent source energy of the world. In terms of age, he was merely a fledgling who had just stepped onto the path of cultivation. In fact, he had not even officially stepped into the 6 paths of reincarnation. It was hard to imagine what kind of earth-shattering changes he would bring when he officially entered the samsara. Perhaps all the rules would be rewritten because of him. Mother, oh mother, you've helped me find a rather incredible friend. Li Qingshan found that the small world also liked the mountains. Although the feedback was not as strong as the world fragments, it did not reject anything and had a great appetite. Of course, the landing point of these giant stars that could not be burned out in the air was a problem. If they were not careful, it could become the judgment day in the apocalypse. After the mountain was torn apart, it would be at least a few hundred miles away. No matter where it landed, it would cause a huge earthquake, not to mention the other effects. Be it innate stage martial artists or chi practitioners, there would not be a single living person within 1,000 miles. Hence, the sea became the best choice. And after the small world devoured the pieces of the world fragments, its size also expanded rapidly, becoming bigger and bigger. The land was not affected much, but the sea level was falling rapidly. When Li Qingshan threw the mountains into the sea, it finally stabilized. Boom, 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 boom. The sea seemed to be boiling. Huge waves rose to the sky, blocking out the sun. However, he had to control the rhythm, or there would be another huge flood. Fortunately, the world fragments and the big and small mountains belonged to a complete world, and there was a certain balance, so there would not be too much of a problem. When the lightning on the snow mountain dissipated, Xuebing descended from the sky and landed on the top of the mountain. She looked around in surprise. She did not succeed in ascending, but she did succeed in passing the tribulation. Both her cultivation and strength had undergone a qualitative change. She waved her hand again, condensing water into a mirror. There was not a single strand of white hair on her head, even the corners of her eyes and the tips of her eyebrows had faded. Her body was full of youthful vigor, and it was obvious that her lifespan had increased a lot. She was surprised. What is going on? After devouring a large number of world fragments, the small world was no longer a small world. It was enough to accommodate the existence of cultivators of a higher level. She could not ascend after passing the tribulation, but this was a good thing for her. Ordinary tribulation was naturally easier to pass than the tribulation of ascension. Her 60% chance of success had become 80% or even 100%. This was a great thing for all the cultivators in the world. The bigger the world, the more convenient it was for cultivation. From this day onwards, the structure of the world would change. The foundation establishment cultivators who had passed the tribulation would become the masters of the world, and the martial arts world would become an old dream. What changed was not only the structure of the human world, but also the geographical structure of the entire world. Li Qingshan scattered islands all over the sea. It was not that he particularly liked islands, but the moon's reflection could only pass through things of this size. Although there were no longer any living creatures in the dead world, the corpses that were still warm still contained a lot of information. Many new strange life forms would definitely be born from these islands. However, perhaps it should not be said to be so absolute. The woman who had turned into a rock was so strong that even flames and tremors could not destroy it. Suddenly, a crack appeared on her despairing face. Even though all the spiritual chi had dissipated, there might still be a wisp of spirit or obsession left. And those medicinal pills and magic treasures that had lost their value also recovered a touch of spiritual light under the nourishment of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Li Qingshan's voice suddenly rang through the entire world. Do you want my power? Then go and find it in the depths of the sea. A brand new era had begun. The hero king had never left. Floating astronomy. Chapter 1254. Luo Ho and Little Ming suddenly looked back. At this moment, countless mountains were being pulled by gravity and gathered together, blocking their line of sight. Between the cracks, he could see a few stars embedded in the depths of space, shining silently. They were distant and silent, but he could sense a hint of uneasiness from them. Gu Yenying followed his gaze as well. Something's wrong. There's a bad omen. The first to speak was actually Li Qingshan. The spirit turtle's warning had turned good fortune into bad, and it was a very bad omen. The shadow of death that enveloped him was as dark and heavy as the void. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "If you're done playing, let's leave here as soon as possible. Let's go." Although there were still many mountains and fragments of worlds that he had yet to absorb, Li Qingshan did not hesitate at all. With a wave of his hand, he put away the water mirror's image and reversed the force field. He pushed the mountains and meteors away and flew towards the Kunping. Their vision widened. Gu Yenying's eyes narrowed. Something was approaching from the depths of space. At first, it was only the size of a speck of dust, but it enlarged in the blink of an eye. She cried out involuntarily, so fast. That thing moved no slower than the Kunping. Even its body was no smaller than the Kunping. However, it did not resemble any bird or beast. It did not even seem like a carapace. It was a translucent green, revealing its internal organs. There seemed to be a tentacle that was even longer than its body where its head should be. It created a ripple in space as it swam over quickly. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "It's a void-devouring beast. How powerful is this thing? How many heavenly tribulations has it undergone? Can we destroy it?" Li Qingshan could not help but ask. His strength had just reached an unprecedented level, and he could already sense such great danger. He was rather unused to it. He wanted to fight to his heart's content in space. Void-devouring beasts don't undergo heavenly tribulations, and they're different from other living beings. They're basically a natural disaster. I'd advise you to run for your life obediently. The smell of blood has spread out in the sea. It won't just attract one shark. As soon as Luo Ho Xiaoming finished speaking, void-devouring beasts appeared from all directions. Every one of them had a different shape. Some had a round body with countless short tentacles. Some looked like a yellow jellyfish. The head was uneven. There were 7 or 8 long legs growing out from the bottom. Some of them had no stable shape and were constantly changing like liquid. They were simply ugly monsters that were beyond imagination in nightmares. However, every single one of them was over 1,000 miles long, and the largest one was over 10,000 miles long. If this figure was a living being, then it would be extremely terrifying. Every one of them was probably a godlike existence. What the hell are these things? Let's go! Li Qingshan immediately retracted his battle intent. He landed lightly on the Kunpeng's back. He didn't want to start a fight with this group of things. Qingshan, open a path for me. The wings of the Kunpeng spanned 1,000 miles. He returned to his original form. Alright. Li Qingshan gripped the living soil of the 9 heavens tightly and activated his earthly force field. Like a gale sweeping away fallen leaves, he swept away the layers of mountains and meteorites, clearing all obstacles. At this moment, the void-devouring beasts had already gathered. They were like ants attracted by breadcrumbs, fighting to devour everything in the air. The mountains that stretched for several thousand miles were devoured by 2 void-devouring beasts in a few moments. The spatial fragments were the main focus of their fight. Li Qingshan couldn't help but rejoice that he still had the spirit tortoise to foretell good or bad luck. If he had been slightly slower, he would have been trapped inside. The destructive power of these void-devouring beasts was truly too strong. However, he found it slightly strange. Although these void-devouring beasts were astonishingly fast, they shouldn't be this fast. At this moment, the slimy body of the void-devouring beast that was constantly changing forms suddenly opened many eyes of different sizes. These eyes were empty and emotionless, and they all stared at the living soil of the 9 heavens in Li Qingshan's hand. "We've been targeted." Li Qingshan gripped the living soil of the 9 heavens tightly and swung his hand as hard as he could. A mountain moved horizontally, blocking the void-devouring beast's path. Soon afterwards, the mountain was devoured and melted away by the void-devouring beast. Instead, even more eyes bulged out as if they were confirming their target. A single clump of the living soil of the 9 heavens was worth thousands of mountains, and even the Kunpeng itself was treated as food. Although it did not possess the intelligence of a living being, it quickly swam towards the Kunpeng under its powerful instincts. Li Qingshan's heart sank. The sense of danger became extremely great. This void-devouring beast was several times larger than the Kunpeng. If they were devoured, they would probably die. "Yenying, don't be afraid of the obstacles up ahead. Speed up and shake it off." The Kunpeng flapped its wings and took off without any regard. As Li Qingshan cleared the obstacles up ahead, he powered the earthly force field and tossed all the rocks behind him, creating an obstacle to stop the void-devouring beast. The void-devouring beast pursued relentlessly, swallowing all the mountains and rocks it encountered. It actually did not slow down at all, and instead gradually closed the distance between them. Luoho Xiaoming opened the Qingkuan pouch. Strong winds roared out. The Kunpeng rode the wind and flew even faster. In the blink of an eye, it flew past the mountains and saw the boundless dark void again. The 2 colossal beings, one in front and one behind, were engaged in the most primitive chase through the void at an unbelievable speed. They were only several tens of thousands of kilometers apart, which would be considered a great distance in any world. However, if their figures and speed were taken into consideration, it was almost a single step away. Gu Yenying said, "Qingshan, we'll be out of the predicted flight path if we keep flying for a while longer. Think of something." Li Qingshan suddenly turned around, gripped the living soil of the 9 heavens tightly, and threw a punch at the void. Using the power of the earth from the living soil of the 9 heavens, he pushed the tremors of the ox demon to an unprecedented level. Even the dark void trembled. The Kunpeng accelerated once again, while the void-devouring beast bumped into this trembling void. Its body twisted and changed. Even though it was unharmed, its speed was greatly slowed down. Li Qingshan was delighted. It was indeed useful. Punch after punch, the void-devouring beast slowed down again and again, and the distance between it and the Kunpeng grew larger and larger. Gradually, the void-devouring beast seemed tiny. Suddenly, the void-devouring beast disappeared in the void, as if it had never existed. "Did you shake it off?" Gu Yenying asked. Li Qingshan knitted his brows, but the sense of danger in his heart did not disappear. Instead, the shadow of death grew heavier. Luoho Xiaoming yelled, "No, it's in front of us." Li Qingshan abruptly turned around, and the void-devouring beast suddenly appeared in front of him. Its enormous body filled his field of vision, and its translucent skin glowed with a green light. Suddenly, a 1,000-mile-long abyss appeared in its body, stretching across the void and waiting for the Kunpeng to walk right into its trap. Ji Hao finally understood why these void-devouring beasts were so fast, and why they could actually teleport over such a long distance in the void. Chapter 12:55. The tower pierced through the layers of clouds and reached the sky. The sun shimmered in the aura of death. Even the sunlight seemed lifeless. Everything within a range of 1,500 kilometers had been reduced to a land of death. Perhaps this was the tallest structure in the history of this world. Ghostly flames flickered as souls of the dead wandered around the tower, making it seem even more deathly still. The corpse kings and ghost kings built the tower without any complaints, silently enduring the harsh scoldings of the overseers like lowly laborers. They suppressed all of their resentment and waited for the day the tower was completed. By then, there would be a sumptuous feast, using all the creatures in this world as food to satisfy their insatiable hunger. This day would not be too far away. At this moment, at the boundary of this land of death, in the dense forest that was eternally shrouded in mist, a green sprout burst out of the earth. In the beginning it was very young, making it impossible to tell what plant it was, but it swelled up very quickly, growing into a great banyan tree that required several people to wrap their arms around. However, it still extended its branches towards the sky as if it was not satisfied. Aerial roots as thick as dragons stabbed deep into the ground to support its body that was growing more and more majestic. The laws hidden under the heavens and in the thick earth began to circulate silently. It was like a pair of invisible hands were holding this newborn child. Yes, it was the child of the world. When the great banyan tree grew to be bigger than any tree or mountain in this world, it was already big enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with the tower thousands of miles away. The milky white fog spread under his feet like a thick and soft carpet, dark green patterns embedded in it. At the end of the carpet was a deathly gray floor. Scattered with many sharp, black nails, it was also like a chopping board. A forest of withered leaves stood where it was in despair. A pair of dark green eyes opened on the great banyan tree, staring at the tower in the distance. The rugged tree bark was like a furrowed brow, and the drooping leaves were like a beard, vaguely forming a face. It was the banyan tree king. With his control over most of the world, he used all of his 10,000 years of cultivation and all of his strength to prepare for a great battle. This battle, it would decide the fate of the world. And his fate. He obviously was not alone. Demon Chi surged into the air and gathered behind him. It was not just the demon kings of the Mist Province. There was also the Green Province, the Scarlet Province, and so on. The White Camel Sand King was among them. There were also his other old friends. He had started preparing a year ago and sent out the summons 3 days ago. Not just the Demon Clan. When the Silver Dragon King flew over, the great cultivators appeared with him. The King of Southern Yu led them, but it was not just the honored guests of the King of Southern Yu's estate. The Dauntless Monk and the Unraging Monk were among them too. A white cloud descended from the sky, sweeping away the layers of gray haze. It still maintained its original white color. In the sky above this world of death, it emitted a dazzling white light. Layers of white feathers clustered around Li Fengyuan. He cupped his hands towards the banyan tree king from afar, displaying the bearing of a king. Who here was not a king? Without undergoing 3 heavenly tribulations, one wouldn't even be qualified to participate in this battle. All the connections were used and all the power was gathered, waiting for the arrival of one person. The hungry ghost realm's true target, the enemy of Buddha, little n. Apart from Li Fengyuan, who knew how many times older than she was, but no one felt displeased. In the past few years, she had basically killed her way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. She had stepped on the corpses of countless demon kings and great cultivators, living up to the name Enemy of Buddha. She was even more terrifying than the demon king of the North Moon in the past. The entire ghost tower fell into an uproar. Under the supervision of the overseer, the corpse kings and ghost kings were on standby. An aura of death surged into the air as they stood as equals. It was like a siege. There was no such thing as a sneak attack. There was no such thing as a siege between the living and the dead. The ghouls instead seemed even more orderly. The corpse kings roared and bellowed furiously. Their morale was even higher. It was not just because they had an absolute commander behind them, Emperorly. It was also because they had no path of retreat. They would either die here or they would be devoured. The demon kings and cultivators belonged to over a dozen camps of various sizes. Even if they failed to take down the tower, they could retreat from this land of death. The Banyan Tree King was only their convener. There were not many powerful cultivators who had undergone 3 heavenly tribulations who were accustomed to following the commands of others, as they already stood at the apex of the 9 provinces. However, there were many battles of this scale in the hungry ghost realm. The corpse kings and ghost kings also had to obey their superiors. The Banyan Tree King's frown deepened. This battle would definitely be fraught with danger. But why had the Dragon Province not responded at all? In his original plan, the Great Xia Empire was supposed to be the main force in this battle. This had nothing to do with personal grievances. According to his predictions, once the ghost tower was completed, this world would be anchored down by the hungry ghost realm, unable to break free. That would be 100 times more terrifying than an invasion from the demon domain. If the demon domain wanted to invade, it would be completely up to the demon folk to fight. At most, they would have the convenience of demon caverns, but that would only be equivalent to a secret path. However, behind these ghouls was the hungry ghost realm. The 6 realms of Sasra had always been closely connected to the various worlds. Once a passageway was opened, it would be a broad path. Countless ghouls could swarm in, which was why the Umbral Een sect treated it as a trump card to perish together with the world. And the hungry ghost realm's offensive power was extraordinarily powerful. They were basically the natural enemy of the various worlds. Several decades ago, a mere corpse king had almost ripped off a piece of the 9 provinces in the Green Province. The hungry ghost realm did not immediately launch a large-scale invasion and instead built the tower here painstakingly because of Little Anne's existence. They were greatly restrained. Once the ghost tower was completed, they would probably be able to use the hungry ghost realm to break through the restraints of the laws of the world and send in existences that had surpassed the 3rd heavenly tribulation. Even if that Emperor Li descended in person, the Great Xia Empire would be nothing. However, under such dangerous circumstances, the Dragon Province actually showed no signs of activity at all. Recently, they simply ignored the chaos in the world, allowing the ghost tower to constantly rise and defend the Dragon Province. This had completely exceeded his expectations. He had sent out a signal to work together some time ago, but it had vanished completely like a rock sinking into the ocean. Now that the ghost tower was about to be completed, he was finally forced to take action. That was because if he still did not take action, she would take action. Ding! The ethereal sound of a bell rang out in everyone's ears. It was so clear that it seemed to be right next to their ears. Their hearts rippled, basically unable to calm down. The White Camel Sand King's wooden face twitched. Before Pearl City was burnt down, this was the first bell that rang out. Even if everyone present had never heard the bell in person, they had heard of the legends. She's here. Ding! The entire ghost tower fell into an uproar. The impact was far greater than the cultivators and demon kings. The overseers swung their whips and maintained order, but fear flashed through their eyes. Clearly, they knew what they were about to face. Their morale immediately plummeted. When the white sacred flames descended, the hungry ghost realm would be annihilated. They had come here to end a legend, or to bear witness to a legend. Drifting Astronomy, you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.